10-year-old Seline Mars waits by a window, wondering when the young Duke will arrive. Following her father's path as a knight for Duke Willow, Seline trains hard to become one herself. Seline asks if the guests are arriving today, and the woman tells her to have patience. Seline smiles to herself, wondering whose knight she is destined to become. Seline notes that Duke Willow, the solemn governor of the north, appears much cooler than her father. Expecting the heir to follow suit, Seline assumes the young Duke will also be impressive. She envisions a master with massive muscles and overwhelming physical strength. Seline's imagination of a powerful and charming protector leaves her beaming with excitement. A sudden, loud rattle sounds as the carriage arrives, surprising the expectant girl. A sudden, quick tap sounds as Seline slams her book shut and rushes out while the woman tells her to be respectful. Seline watches from a distance as a white-haired boy finally steps out of the carriage. She is taken aback by the boy's delicate features and bright blue eyes. Stunned, Seline can only stare in disbelief at the boy's fragile appearance. Her imaginary hero shatters completely. The boy smiles while Seline looks visibly exhausted by the reality of the situation. Seline asks why he is smiling, and the boy admits he finds the whole situation interesting. Recalling her father's words, Seline reminds herself that a knight must serve their master regardless of their traits. Seline clenches her fist, deciding to serve him even if he is weak. Taking a deep breath, Seline formally introduces herself and salutes the heir of the Willow Duchy. The white-haired boy politely acknowledges her, saying it is a pleasure to meet Lady Mars. Seline observes his gentle expression, convinced that he is an incredibly delicate child. Seline criticizes his greasy smile, while the boy thinks to himself that she is easy to read. A sudden, shocking realization hits Seline as she stares at the boy. A quick step sounds as Seline approaches to ask the boy if he lives in the capital. Seline leans in with a worried look, hesitant to finish her thought. Seline asked the young Duke if he was bullied by anyone during his time in the capital. The red-haired girl stares intently while the white-haired boy looks on in utter confusion. He repeats her question in disbelief, confused by the mention of being bullied. Seline explains that his strange way of smiling is the primary clue to his secret suffering. Seline pulls at her face to mimic his expression, showing him how he looks to her. The boy laughs as Seline explains that in her neighborhood, only weaklings smile cautiously like that. Seline gets in his face, demanding to know if someone is currently bullying him. Amused by the misunderstanding, the boy decides to play along and asks her how she knew. Seline laughs while the boy shakes. Wiping a tear from his eye, the boy listens as Seline reassures him that being weak is not a sin. Seeing him wipe his eye, Seline mistakenly believes he is crying from emotional trauma. Seline imagines the boy being harassed and isolated by mean children in the capital. Seline holds out a handkerchief, telling the boy to use it for his tears. Leading him to a bench, she tells him not to criticize himself too much for his nature. Seline sits and suggests that with enough effort, he could become a fraction as strong as the Duke. The boy hides his face behind the handkerchief as Seline estimates his potential strength at 1/30th of his father's. Seline enthusiastically promises to help him achieve his goal of becoming stronger. Surprised by her sudden offer, the boy asks why she would want to help him. Seline declares she will be his knight because it is her duty to care for a difficult master. Touched by her sincere resolve, the boy gives a genuine smile and thanks her. As the sun sets, Seline tells the boy to trust her lead while she plans his training. Seline asks how long he is staying, and the boy says he will be there for 1 month. They sit together in the evening glow as Seline notes that a month is a very short time. The boy says he has to go back now, leaving Seline looking dejected. He reassures her they will meet again tomorrow because the time they have to make him brave is short. Seline encourages the young Duke to do his best during their upcoming training. Seline waves goodbye and promises to see him again tomorrow. The white-haired boy chuckles and waves back as she wheezes. He ponders her previous comment about him potentially being bullied. Damian notes that as the Willow heir, he wields authority no one would dare challenge. He is a celebrated genius swordsman at the capital's most prestigious academy. He is capable of outmaneuvering even the most devious nobles in the capital. Damian realizes Seline is the first person to show him such blunt disappointment. He considers how he would normally punish anyone who committed such a disrespectful mistake. Damian reflects on how Seline's bright personality has surprisingly affected him. He clenches his fist while staring out over the quiet balcony. A soft blush appears on the white-haired boy's face as he smiles. Seline looks incredibly frustrated and begins to shake with intensity. The pair stands together in a vast, snowy landscape. The scene shifts to the previous night inside the carriage. A carriage clatters as Duke Willow asks Damian when he intends to return to the capital. Damian explains he hasn't decided yet since his school break has just started. Damian declines his father's invitation to see horses, citing a prior appointment to meet Seline. The Duke asks if the young miss of the Mars family is Seline. He confirms her identity and gestures while speaking to his son. Damian looks out the window, thinking about the cute child he has just met. He smiles to himself, deciding that her name suits her perfectly. A new day begins as the scene shifts. A hand waves enthusiastically to catch the young Duke's attention. Damian is baffled by the girl's outdated and old-fashioned appearance. Seline pants heavily as Damian eventually realizes it is her. Damian offers a polite compliment about her appearance as a basic noble courtesy.
Seline notices his fine clothes and asks if he wore something new today.
Damian produces a spare set of commoner clothes with a sudden, quick flick. The boy lets out a confused, high-pitched whimper. The story returns to the present moment. A close-up reveals the shabby and worn training shirt. Seline explains that wearing the simple shirt is necessary for their training session. Damian looks breathtakingly handsome as snow falls gently around him. Seline sighs and warns that he will be scolded by his mother for dirtying fine clothes. Damian agrees to change quickly and begins to walk toward the woods. Seline points toward a nearby tree and tells him to change there instead. Damian is left completely stunned by her casual suggestion. A cold wind whistles as she promises to turn her back while he changes. Damian walks into the trees with a soft rustle, complaining about the morning's wardrobe effort. He announces he is finished as his shadow stretches across the snow. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick turn as she looks back. Damian bashfully asks how he looks in the simple commoner tunic. Seline stares at him in a moment of speechless silence. Damian blushes and looks away as she continues to gaze at him. A sudden shiver takes her as Damian asks what is wrong with his appearance. Seline loudly demands that he stop using such awkward formal honorifics. She points with a look of intense and serious determination. Damian realizes that Seline wants him to use her first name, which implies a secret closeness. Seline cringes at the formality, unaware of the aristocratic weight of her request. Damian politely addresses Seline. A hand clenches tightly in anticipation. Seline determinedly announces their rabbit hunt.
Seline describes the rabbit's physical traits.
A simple rope snare is prepared. Seline boasts about her trap-making nickname. Seline is actually lying about her experience. Her father strictly forbade forest visits. The local night school is famous. Seline is a standout sword student. Seline shows off a small trophy. Damian explores the frozen, snowy woods. The scene shifts to the wilderness. Damian finds the location very secluded. Damian worries about the dangerous environment. The pair walks through deep snow. Seline feels physical strain from walking. They spot a suitable hunting tree. Seline selects a tree for tracking. Seline orders Damian to gather wood. Damian begins collecting the wood pieces. Damian finishes the task surprisingly fast. Damian presents a pile of branches. Damian asks if the supply is efficient. Seline struggles to remember trap construction. Damian offers his academy-taught trap knowledge. Seline questions Damian's specific hunting training. The wooden trap is finally finished. Damian explains where rabbits typically burrow. Damian finds her bossy attitude fascinating and decides to indulge her mood. Damian gives a genuine, warm smile. Damian walks away to set traps. Seline is impressed by his skill. Damian signals for silence and caution. They spot their quarry nearby. The rabbit is finally in sight. They stare intently at the animal. They move slowly toward the target. The rabbit senses them and flees. The rabbit runs away very quickly. Damian holds Seline back from arming. Damian warns Seline not to taste it. Seline feels an eerie presence while Damian mentions seeing another rabbit. They move to a new spot. Seline falls during the clumsy heck. They return home with no success. Seline vows to catch Willow here. The scene shifts to the mansion. Someone asks if Damian visited Marianne again. The companions confirm his visit and wonder about his recent change in behavior. The Duchess wonders why her son visits Marianne daily. The Duke explains Damian visits the Baron's young buyer. The family share a long history as knights. Damian is curious about the daughter, Seline. Damian's face flushes with a soft blush. Seline is famous for helping her father govern. Documents detail the Baron's difficult path to nobility. The young Baron was an unlikely heir. A plague devastated the barren northern lands. The tragedy left the young Baron devastated. The Baron unexpectedly inherited the noble title. The village initially rejected the Baron's leadership. Seline was born during these difficult times. Seline grew up befriending the local tavern. The Duke recalls a shocking childhood incident. Young Seline once fought to defend her honor. The Baron apologized profusely for his daughter's actions. The Duchess is stunned by the tale. Young Seline interrupted the apology in her pajamas. She argued that she was the primary aggressor. Seline shouted her confession with absolute conviction. She insisted on sharing the Baron's punishment. The Duchess finds the story absolutely delightful. Seline's presence slowly improved the town's atmosphere. Seline's vibrant joy became the town's strength. A red-haired lady proudly holds a ticken. Seline loudly commands the children's attention. Seline demands her friends focus on their quest. Johanne watches the scene with quiet intensity. Seline introduces her night school friends to Damian. Seline corrects her friend's overly casual address.
Damian laughs off the social awkwardness.
Bella eagerly asks Damian about capital fashions. Seline tries to temper Bella's frantic enthusiasm. Bella quickly sketches Damian's refined capital attire. Johanne complains of fatigue and sits down. Bella ignores the others to interview Damian. Johanne leaves to help his injured father. Bella remains captivated by Damian's formal suit. Bella claims she is too busy to play. Seline stares in disbelief as Johanne leaves. Seline introduces Chico and Mia to Damian. Seline explains common village treats like bread.
Damian is surprised people actually buy bread.
They discuss the local veterinarian's important role. Seline asks about Damian's return to school.
Seline wishes Damian could stay and marry Am.
Seline's plan for fun memories falls apart. The remaining children leave after finding Clomis.
Seline despairs as her training plan fails.
Lord Damian looks like a prince. Damian was terrible at every game the countryside kids like to play, leaving the local children confused by his performance. A golden scone sits on his play. Seline announces she wants a scone. She wants a scone, using it to secretly signal her frustration. Damian remains totally clueless, assuming the children simply have a great love for eating scones. The long school break ends. Damian returns to the academy, where a blonde-haired boy with red eyes approaches him. The blonde boy greets Damian and asks where he went during their pike. Damian turns around looking elegant. Damian says he went north, and his friend is impressed he lasted so long there. The blonde boy notes there is nothing to do in the north compared to other regions. The blonde boy notices a jewel pendant on a leather strap and asks what it is. The blonde boy leans in for a closer look while Damian appears slightly annoyed. Damian smiles and identifies the gift as a sapphire.
The blonde boy dismisses it as glass, but Damian giggles a hee-hee and insists it is a sapphire.
Damian fondly remembers Seline's smile. Seline gives the jewel to Damian. Seline claims she found the stone in her mother's jewelry box. Seline triumphantly holds up the colorful stone while her friends watch in the background. Seline explains she is giving the sapphire to Damian as a gift. Seline smiles brightly and calls the stone a goodbye gift. Damian touches the leather-wrapped jewel, recalling Seline's instructions on how to wear it. The blonde boy stares in shock. Damian walks away as his friend shouts in disbelief at his bizarre behavior. The blonde boy shouts for him to wait. The scene shifts to Red Brittle Academy. The blonde boy continues to shout. The blonde boy refuses to visit the villa to practice swordplay during the break. Damian is surprised to learn that Duke Willow is coming to town. They wonder if the Duke is coming for work or for another reason. The night school break begins. The blonde boy looks startled. Damian asks what the school break has to do with anything. Damian ignores his friend's glare. An invitation is offered for later.
Damian looks pensive while his friend grumbles about his own busy schedule.
Damian stands alone in Grand Room. A letter is opened with a sudden, quick whip sounding. Damian reacts with shock to Muse. The letter says Baron Mars and Seline are coming and to prepare rooms.
Damian wishes she had come sooner.
A grand carriage travels the city. Seline looks out window excitedly. Seline marvels at the buildings while Baron Mars tells her to stay on her feet. Baron Mars worries Seline will cause trouble, but Duke Willow says children always do. Duke Willow hopes the children will get along since they will see each other often. Seline's ear perks up as Baron Mars worries she will be a holler. Seline turns around with a sudden turn sounding and asks why she would be a bother. Seline boldly insists that people remember those who helped them, and Damian will be thrilled. Baron Mars is skeptical after hearing Seline played with the young Duke in the north. Baron Mars apologizes profusely for any trouble, while Duke Willow laughs off the formality. Baron Mars continues to fret over his daughter's behavior, but Duke Willow finds the entire situation amusing. Seline gazes out the carriage window, mesmerized by the magnificent sights of the capital city. Seline spots a grand tower reaching toward the sky and excitedly calls for the others to look. Seline confidently points at the structure, certain that such a grand clock must be the work of the gods. Duke Willow questions why she thinks that as she stares back with wide-eyed conviction. Seline explains that she learned a survival technique at school involving a stick to tell time. Seline describes how a simple wooden pole casts a shadow to mark the passing hours. Seline concludes the tower is a divine sundial, but Duke Willow clarifies it is the Academy's clock tower. Seline is stunned to learn the massive, ornate building is actually a school. Seline wonders why a school requires a clock of such ridiculous and intimidating proportions. Duke Willow explains that the powerful wizard responsible for building the academy chose that specific design. Seline is captivated as the Duke recounts the legend of a wizard who helped build the empire 8 centuries ago. After the war, the powerful wizard settled in the capital and established the famous academy. Seline's eyes sparkle with pure wonder at the mention of magic and ancient legends. Seline's heart races with a sudden excited bump sounding as she asks if she can see fireballs at the academy. Duke Willow clarifies that fireballs are not found there, prompting Seline to ask about ice magic. Seline lets out a long, heavy sigh, sounding as the Duke confirms that ice spells are also absent. Duke Willow describes how the tower focuses on practical magic, such as refining gold and creating precious alloys. He mentions a recent breakthrough where holy water is used to significantly strengthen forged iron. Seline listens intently as she begins to form her own conclusions about the academy's layout. Seline declares that the wizard who designed the academy must have been quite poor. Seline looks over the city, logicizing that a wealthy man would have chosen a different site for the school. Seline elaborates on her theory, surprising the Duke with her unique perspective on city planning. Seline believes the vast, empty lands of the north would have been a superior choice since the ground is too cold for crops. Seline points upward, insisting that utilizing wasteland for education is the most efficient use of land.
Duke Willow laughs, admitting she might be right and that the wizard might have appreciated her advice.
Seline is suddenly struck by a profound and shocking realization about Damian. Seline concludes that Damian's perceived weakness is due to the distracting environment of the capital city. Seline surveys the vibrant marketplaces, imagining how impossible it must be to study amidst such constant excitement. In Seline's imagination, a young Damian is constantly lured away from his training by delicious treats and snacks. Her hand tightens with a sudden, firm clench sounding as she vows to help him improve. Seline reminds herself of her father's teaching that unwavering effort can overcome any obstacle. Seline sits tall in the carriage, her face set with a renewed and fierce determination to train her friend. The carriage finally arrives at the grand gates of Willow Manor in the capital city of Redbrittle. The Duchess and a refined Damian wait patiently in the courtyard for their guests to arrive. The Duchess moves forward with a sudden, quick dash sounding as the carriage door opens. The Duchess embraces her husband while Baron Mars assures Seline she can exit the carriage on her own. Seline's shoe meets the pavement with a soft, distinct step sounding. Damian offers a polite and formal greeting to the Baron's young daughter. Seline curtsies gracefully before Damian, maintaining her best noble behavior for the arrival. Seline breaks her formal facade for a brief moment by giving Damian a playful and secret wink. Damian smiles warmly as Seline notes he has grown significantly during their time apart. Baron Mars lifts Seline up with a sudden strong hup sounding and prepares to lead her to their quarters. Baron Mars pauses in confusion as he realizes they aren't heading toward the guest house. Baron Mars watches the servants and asks why their belongings are being taken into the main manor. Duke Willow explains that the main house will be much more comfortable for Seline during their stay. Baron Mars tries to decline the generous offer, but the Duke remains firm in his hospitality. Duke Willow insists on the arrangement for convenience, leaving the Baron no choice but to reluctantly agree. Seline follows Damian into the manor, her eyes fixed on the sapphire pendant he still wears proudly. A brilliant chandelier illuminates the grand, ornate hall. Golden light glimmers across the pristine white marble staircase. Younger Seline reacts with a sudden, rhythmic stomp-stomp sounding, while complaining the manor is far larger than Damian's father described. Seline is outraged that the Duke called this massive estate small, while Damian simply agrees with his father's assessment. Seline argues that the mansion is large enough for a whole city, leaving her completely baffled by his standards. Seline sulks as Damian points out that other noble houses in the capital are even larger than his own. Damian offers a sheepish and slightly awkward smile. Seline looks up with a confused and wide-eyed expression. Seline is visibly shocked to learn that Damian actually has a friend, which Damian finds somewhat insulting. Seline's realization is taken by a sudden light boink sounding as she explains her prejudice against capital dwellers. Damian laughs at her honesty as Seline concludes that at least some people in the capital must be decent. Seline leans in close with an expression of intense curiosity. Damian is puzzled why she is suddenly bringing up Russell Ryder's name. Seline declares her intention to ensure Russell treats Damian with the respect a friend deserves. Seline points her finger with a look of fierce determination. Seline promises to look out for him until she is old enough to serve as his official escort knight. The pair faces one another with a sudden, quick turn. Seline's attention is taken by a sudden, soft whisper sounding as Damian teases her about being his only true friend. Seline looks up in surprise as Damian calls her name. Damian questions why she believes his social circle is so incredibly limited. Seline reacts with a sudden, bright beam sounding, looking thrilled at the prospect of him having multiple friends. Seline breathes a sigh of relief, noting that having a backup friend is a good safety net. Seline recalls Damian's poor performance in childhood games and assumed he lacked any social experience. Seline demands to know the second friend's name so she can vet them personally. Damian's gaze is taken by a sudden, deep ponder sounding. Seline waits for an answer with a blank and expectant look. Narrative text reveals that Damian actually considers most of his peers to be mere classmates rather than friends. Damian rubs the back of his neck with a guilty and sheepish expression. Seline begins to flail her arms with a sudden energetic flail sounding as she scolds him for exaggerating his popularity. Seline is taken by a sudden sharp hup sounding as she worries he will be incredibly lonely during the school break. Seline tries to backtrack on her comment to save his feelings, but Damian quietly admits she is right. Narrative text reflects on Damian's isolated lifestyle within his own home. Damian looks down with a melancholic and lonely expression. Narrative text explains that Damian's childhood was consumed by endless swordsmanship training. A younger Damian is shown diligently practicing with a wooden sword and a training dummy. Narrative text notes that his only social life consisted of mandatory and formal noble gatherings. A younger Damian looks bored and out of place while holding a glass at a fancy party. Seline reacts to the sad story with a sudden, watery, teary sounding. Damian observes her emotional reaction and finds her incredibly transparent. Damian leans in to ask how much longer she will be staying at the manor. Damian expresses his sincere happiness that she won't be leaving just yet. Damian admits that visiting her home was the most enjoyable experience of his life. Damian continues to move closer, his expression softening with affection. Damian confesses that meeting her made him realize how empty his life in the capital truly was. Seline blushes intensely as she realizes how close their faces have become. Damian's head falls to her shoulder with a sudden, heavy drop and jolt sounding, making her panic and think he is crying. Seline reacts with a sudden nervous sweat sounding as she desperately promises to be his friend and playmate. Damian looks up at her with a stunned and wide-eyed expression. Seline gently wipes his face with a handkerchief while pleading with him to stop being so sad. Damian watches her with a soft gaze and quietly agrees to her request. A full moon shines brightly in the dark night sky. Baron Mars reminds Seline of her mother's warning to never cause trouble for the Willow family. Seline's head is taken by a sudden, gentle pat sounding from her father as he praises her memory. Baron Mars instructs Seline to remain on her best behavior while staying as guests in the manor. Seline reacts with a confused look while questioning her father's statement. Seline is taken by a sudden, warm squeeze sounding as her father promises a gift for her obedience. Seline reacts with a look of sudden realization and surprise. Seline's hand is taken by a sudden, firm push sounding against her father's shoulder. Seline moves with a sudden, rapid dash sounding as she runs out of the room. Narrative text conveys Seline's request for continued sword-fighting lessons during their stay. Seline brandishes a wooden sword with a look of pure joy and excitement. Baron Mars laughs and promises to help his daughter with her training. Seline shouts her thanks through the open window as her father watches. The scene shifts to the grand manor as the next morning arrives. Seline hums a cheerful tune as she and her father head out for the day. Baron Mars reflects on the honor of sharing breakfast with the Duke earlier that morning. Narrative text contemplates the uncrossable boundary that remains between a lord and his most trusted vassal. Baron Mars explains that his familiarity with the training grounds comes from years of escorting the Duke. Seline moves with a sudden, rhythmic step, X3 sounding as she follows the path. Damian's attention is taken by a sudden, graceful turn sounding as he notices their arrival. Damian stands in the middle of the training grounds and asks about their sudden appearance. Baron Mars' reaction is taken by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as he recognizes Lord Damian. Baron Mars offers a sudden, nervous haha sounding as Damian asks for help with his morning practice. Damian offers a soft and incredibly charming smile. Baron Mars is taken by a sudden, brilliant shine, sounding as he is overwhelmed by Damian's noble aura. Narrative text notes how Baron Mars perceives Damian as a transcendent beauty. Baron Mars considers himself unworthy to instruct a prodigy like Damian, despite the boy's polite request. Baron Mars offers a sudden, deep bow, sounding as he humbles himself before the young lord. Baron Mars suggests the Duke provide instruction instead, noting the chilling intensity of Damian's 13-year-old presence. Seline's interruption is taken by a sudden, heavy, do-done sounding, while her father reacts with a gasp sounding. Baron Mars looks completely drained of life after hearing his daughter's blunt assessment. Baron Mars remains in a state of shock over Seline's lack of tact. Seline criticizes the cleanliness of the training grounds, concluding that Damian has neglected his practice. Narrative text highlights the impeccable maintenance of the manor's training equipment by the staff. Damian laughs at Seline's sharp observation and admits he only came because of her. Seline is skeptical as Damian praises her intelligence with a closed-eye smile. Seline asserts that Damian won't be able to keep up with her father's high skill level. Seline enters a deep state of thought while Damian watches her with amusement. Seline reacts with a look of sudden inspiration. Seline declares that she will train under her father while Damian trains under her. Baron Mars is baffled by Seline's bold proposal for Damian's training. Seline's shoulder is taken by a sudden, anxious tremble sounding as her father tries to escort her away. Baron Mars despairs over his daughter's audacity in his internal thoughts. Seline quotes her instructors about how dedication can eventually surpass natural-born talent. Seline encourages Damian to work hard and offers her assistance to help him improve. Seline's hand is taken by a sudden, open reach sounding toward Damian. Seline promises that they will both make faster progress if they train as a team. Baron Mars is taken by a sudden, overwhelming dizzy sounding as he realizes Seline just lectured a master swordsman. Seline moves with a sudden, confident stride, sounding as she approaches Damian. Seline's voice is taken by a sudden, quiet whisper sounding as she tells Damian not to worry about her father's strictness. Seline stares at Damian in quiet surprise. Damian can't help but let out a sudden, amused pft sounding while Seline looks on in confusion. Baron Mars reacts with a sudden, sharp flinch sounding as he is addressed by the young Duke. Damian lets out a sudden, soft ha sounding and asks the Baron if he may join the day's training. Baron Mars agrees to the request while a rack of training swords sits nearby. Seline and Damian hold wooden training swords as Damian asks what the most important aspect of a slash is. Damian appears confused as he tries to determine the correct sword technique. Seline gives a sudden pleased grin sounding while pointing out that his bent elbow is ruining his swing's power. Seline demonstrates a powerful swing with a sudden, loud whoosh sounding and tells Damian to focus his strength. Damian is impressed by the cool sound of the swing, while Seline privately admits it was her first successful attempt. Damian encourages Seline to keep practicing, while her father watches them from the balcony above. Baron Mars lets out a long, heavy groan sounding as he realizes Damian is intentionally hiding his own skill. Seline and Damian share a cheerful moment as they enjoy their training together. The observer admits that Damian at least seems to be having a good time. Baron Mars asks if Seline will truly be okay on her own while he is away. Baron Mars looks down at Seline as he prepares for his official departure. Seline argues that she isn't a child anymore, but her father reminds her that she still is one. Baron Mars worries about leaving her behind, but explains he cannot take her on his official duties. Baron Mars asks if she remembers his warning, and Seline confirms she was told not to cause Damian any trouble. Seline lets out a loud, frustrated arg sounding and complains that Damian is the one causing her trouble. Seline lets out a sudden, heavy droop sounding and acknowledges that her complaints might seem disloyal. A sudden, loud knock-knock-knock sounding interrupts them as a servant announces the Duke is ready to depart. Baron Mars leads Seline toward the door and says they will continue the discussion upon his return. Seline lets out a sudden, silent pout sounding as she follows her father toward the manor entrance. Baron Mars and Seline descend the grand staircase together. Seline lets out a long, quiet sulk sounding as she complains about Damian being too friendly with her. Seline reminds herself that she is the popular one with 4 whole friends. Seline concludes that Damian is actually the one who is lonely and friendless. Duke Willow praises Seline for her successful sword practice earlier that morning. Duke Willow smiles warmly at the young red-haired girl. Seline's face fills with a sudden, bright glow sounding at the Duke's unexpected praise. Seline tries to contain her excitement so her happiness isn't too obvious to the Duke. Seline lets out a sudden, small cough sounding and politely thanks the Duke for his kind words. The Duke and Seline continue their conversation as they walk through the grand hallway. A sudden, rhythmic clip-clop sounding echoes as Baron Mars and the Duke discuss the children's lack of etiquette. Seline turns around with interest as she hears someone else approaching. The Duchess expresses her genuine delight at finally meeting Seline in person. The Duchess holds Seline's hands and mentions how disappointed she was to have missed her last winter. The Duchess beams with a warm and welcoming smile toward her young guest. Seline looks shocked and asks if the Duchess truly wants to spend time with her. The Duchess explains she always wanted a daughter because her son is such a bore, prompting Damian to laugh. The Duchess teases Damian for being reactionless before a servant reminds her she needs to prepare to leave. The Duchess tells Seline to think about where she wants to go tomorrow as she walks away. Seline stands alone with Damian, her face flushed with a bright and noticeable blush. Damian notices her red face and asks Seline if something is wrong. Damian's hand makes a sudden, gentle slide sounding as he checks her forehead for a fever. Seline reacts with a sudden, startled jolt sounding as Damian's touch catches her off guard. Seline remains incredibly flustered and embarrassed by Damian's sudden concern for her health. A mischievous and devious glint appears in Seline's eye as she thinks of a new plan. Damian smiles and expresses his relief that Seline isn't actually sick. Seline recoils from a sudden, bright flash sounding. Seline's heart pounds with a rhythmic bump sounding as she notices Damian's smile is no longer foolish but looks like the Duchess's. Seline reacts with a sudden, sharp flinch sounding and asks what kind of training they will do today. Seline tells Damian that he should mind his own business. Seline suggests that Damian should focus on doing his homework instead. Seline moves away with a sudden, quick dash sounding as Damian watches her head up the stairs. Damian calls for the butler, who immediately responds to his young lord. Damian asks what kind of place would be good to take a little girl cue. The butler realizes this is exactly what the Duchess asked him yesterday and wonders where he should suggest taking her. The butler worries the Duchess will be upset if he gives the same answer twice and asks for time to think. The butler lets out a long, heavy groan sounding as the maid watches him in concern. The maid raises her hand and asks to speak to the Allard. The brown-haired maid stands ready. Damian looks at her expectantly and asks for her input. The maid trembles with a sudden nervous shake sounding as she mentions a circus has come to the outskirts of the capital. She explains there is a festival near the circus tents and suggests that Seline might enjoy going there. Damian considers the maid's idea. Damian decides that taking Seline to a circus and fair is not a bad idea. A sudden, rhythmic knock-knock sounding echoes as Damian calls for Seline. Damian opens the door with a sudden, sharp click sounding, but Seline tells him she is busy studying and not to distract her. Damian asks if he is really that distracting, and Seline confirms that he is. Damian mentions he had something to tell her that she would like, catching her interest. Damian describes a circus outside the southern gates of the city and asks if she would like to attend. Seline turns back with interest. Seline's eye widens in surprise. Seline hesitates, reminding herself that she still needs to finish her homework. Damian mentions a nearby market that feels like a fair, and Seline reacts with a sudden, excited gasp.
Damian uses her goal of being a knight to remind her that she needs to finish her homework, causing Seline to let out a sudden heavy droop sounding.
Seline dejectedly agrees she must finish, while Damian worries he might have gone too far with the teasing. Damian remarks that the homework for night school must be quite difficult given her struggle. Seline insists that the work is not hard and that she usually finishes very quickly. She explains that it is only the very last problem that is giving her any trouble. Damian leans over with a sudden, soft move sounding and asks if he can take a look at the problem. Damian compliments her nice handwriting and asks her what she has written. Damian points at the open book. Damian points out that her calculation says 128 plus the rest. Seline realizes her mistake and exclaims that she needs a minute. Seline begins writing with a sudden, frantic rush, sounding as she realizes she used the wrong number from the previous equation. Seline trembles with a sudden, intense shake sounding as she nears the end of the problem. Seline shouts with a sudden, joyful yippee sounding and holds her book up, declaring she is finally done. Damian mentions that since the circus is in town, he was thinking of going to see it. Damian sighs and says he would go with a friend if he had one, prompting Seline to reconsider. Seline jumps up with a sudden, quick leap sounding and announces that she has free time now. Seline lets out a sudden, small cough sounding and says she can tag along if he really needs the company. Damian asks if she is serious, and Seline claims it is her future job to escort him everywhere anyway. Damian smiles warmly at Seline. Seline watches Damian as he lets out a sudden, rhythmic ha-ha sounding, thinking his laugh is quite strange. Seline is excited to see the festival, while Damian calls her by her name. Damian explains the crowd is commoners. Damian requests to be called Damian. Damian asks Seline to stop calling him Lord while they are in public together. Seline agrees, but immediately uses his title again out of habit. Damian apologizes for his own habit of being addressed that way as they browse a fruit still. Seline points out a clown selling balloons, and Damian suggests they go take a look. A sudden, rhythmic step-step sounding follows the pair through the bustling fair. Seline reacts with a sudden, shocked gasp sounding at the sight of the clown. Seline pulls Damian away with a sudden, heavy stagger sounding and insists they go somewhere else. Damian is confused because he thought she wanted a balloon, but she insists she is fine without one. Damian offers to pay for things she likes, but she refuses to incur any more debts or cause him trouble. Damian insists that spending money on her is no trouble, but Seline remains firm. Damian looks down with a saddened expression. Damian shows his palm, mentioning a sapphire gift he received. Damian mentions that not repaying his own debt would be unseemly, causing Seline to react with a sudden, sharp flinch sounding. Damian's hand makes a sudden, gentle clasp sounding as he takes Seline's hand. Damian asks for a chance to redeem himself. Damian looks at Seline with a vulnerable, pleading gaze. Seline stammers as she realizes Damian is genuinely upset and asks if giving him a chance will make him feel better. Damian asks if she will finally let him buy her a balloon. Damian pays with a sudden, bright clink sounding and tells the merchant to keep the change, which immediately upsets Seline. Seline scolds Damian for causing the merchant trouble by overpaying for a simple balloon. Seline shouts at Damian to stop being a burden and take his change back. A sudden, rhythmic da-dun sounding announces the acquisition of a blue balloon. Damian watches Seline with a quiet stare and thinks about how strange she is. Damian points at a floral hair ornament and asks if she wants it. Seline explains she was actually thinking her friend Bella would love that particular color. Seline feels a bit wistful as she thinks about how much all of her friends would have enjoyed the fair. Damian watches Seline's wistful expression closely. Damian points out that her sapphire is worth more than the entire fair, making his current spending negligible. Damian makes a sudden, quick lean sounding over a table of jewelry to inspect the items. Damian asks for Seline's expert help in picking out gifts for all of her friends. Seline is surprised by his generous request. Seline considers a hair tie for her friends, but reminds herself she must be careful with Damian's money. A sudden, soft slide sounding occurs as a stall merchant places a bracelet on Seline's wrist. The merchant tells the little girl that the bracelet is a gift. Seline tries to decline the gift, but the merchant insists she is happy that Seline and Damian bought so many other items. Seline's eyes widen with a sudden, quiet glint as she looks at her new bracelet. Seline gives a sudden, polite bow and thanks the merchant for her kindness. Damian offers to buy more things, but Seline refuses, worried about the financial balance between them shifting too far. Seline reacts with a sudden, excited gasp sounding as she spots a new attraction. The scene shifts to a game booth featuring a large teddy bear prize. Seline eagerly suggests they go closer to check out the game. A sudden, loud clatter and thud sounding echoes as a wooden target is struck but fails to fall. Seline observes the targets and realizes they have been rigged with lead to make them much heavier than they look. Seline notes the previous player's technique was wrong and feels confident in her own observation. Seline focuses intently, knowing she must aim for the base of the heavy targets to win. A man lets out a sudden, tired huff-huff sounding after failing to win the teddy bear prize. Damian notices her interest and asks if Seline would like to try the game herself. Seline realizes she is out of money and feels a bit dejected. Seline addresses Damian formally, and he confirms his willingness to play. Damian pays the merchant with a sudden metallic clang sounding to start their turn at the game. The stall merchant explains that hitting all the targets with 10 darts will win the prize. Damian asks Seline which of the prices she would prefer to have. Seline confirms that the large stuffed bear is the prize she is interested in. Damian makes a sudden forceful throw sounding followed by a sharp thud sounding as he begins the game. Seline reacts with a sudden excited whoa sounding as the first target is successfully hit. Seline notes his form and a series of sudden, sharp thud-sounding impacts, observing how he twists his wrist and tilts his shoulder. Damian laughs embarrassedly and admits the game is quite difficult after only hitting one target. A man in the background laughs and remarks that such a result is understandable for a child. Seline stares with an annoyed expression. Seline calls out to a blushing Damian while she trembles with a sudden, angry shake sounding. Seline asks him to lend her 10 silvers. Damian agrees while secretly wondering how everything is going so perfectly according to his plan. Seline turns her back to Damian. Damian watches her and wonders if she can actually succeed or if he should just give up. Seline's hand makes a sudden, firm tighten sounding as she grips the dart. Seline reassures herself that she will definitely succeed. Seline prepares to throw her dart. Seline thinks that using raw force like an adult is impossible, but she hopes to earn praise from the Duke. A sudden, quick whoosh sounding, followed by a sharp thud sounding, accompanies Seline's successful hit, as the merchant exclaims her success. The merchant is shocked and realizes she didn't use a trick, but threw the dart randomly. Damian watches Seline with a contemplative look. A sudden, rhythmic thud-thud sounding continues as the merchant notes she cleared the second target and calls her amazing. The merchant stares in utter disbelief. The merchant wonders if she realized he added lead to the wooden blocks to increase their weight. Targets continue to fall with a sudden rhythmic thud-thud sounding as Damian thinks her performance is better than he expected. Damian observes her incredible focus and notes she is perfectly mimicking a posture she has only seen a few times. Another target falls with a sudden sharp thud sounding as Damian realizes his future guardian has exceptional qualities. Seline stands determinedly before the booth. A sudden, loud whoa-whoa sounding erupts as Seline hits all 10 targets, making the remaining targets let out a sudden, frantic spin sounding. Seline turns around with a sudden, quick flick sounding. Seline reaches out her hand. The merchant hands over the bear, admitting she was successful. Seline asks if there are any prizes left. The merchant assures her that many prizes remain as Damian stands by holding the large bear. Damian asks Seline what is wrong as she stares intently at the booths. Seline focuses on a specific teddy bear. Seline thinks Chico would love it, making the merchant let out a sudden, nervous startle sounding as he internally screams in protest. A variety of colorful teddy bears are presented with a sudden, cheerful ta-da sounding. Seline sits on a bench and tells Damian she is very bestie. A man invites Seline to have some juice with her friend because he was impressed by her dart throwing. Seline runs off with a sudden, rhythmic thud-thud sounding and tells Damian she will be right back. Damian reflects on the fun day and hopes Seline will have beautiful memories of the capital. Damian rests his chin on his hand. Damian looks down with a pensive expression. The butler asks if he should move the luggage, and Damian agrees as he sits next to their many prizes. Damian looks up with a start. The butler notes that the carriage would be too crowded, so he will take the items to the mansion and return shortly. Seline calls out to Damian and asks if she is late. Seline stands before Damian, looking excited. Seline explains that everyone wanted her to teach them how to throw darts, and they gave her treats in exchange. Seline enjoys a strawberry and banana juice, telling Damian it is very good. Seline lets out a sudden, tired huck sounding as she catches her breath. Damian apologizes for finishing his share earlier, while Seline reassures him the drink is delicious. Seline explains that the merchants bought the juice for her and offers Sir Damian his share. Damian asks if she forgot her doll, but Seline insists on taking her prize herself. Damian explains the stuffed bear is worth over 5 gold coins and apologizes for bothering Seline. Seline wonders if she will become his escort, as Damian says she would cause more trouble by caring about every little thing. Damian looks away and notes they will not meet much until he grows up. Damian lets out a sudden, rhythmic ha-ha sounding as he wishes she lived in the capital, though Seline reminds him the north is her home. Seline watches him, realizing he seems to enjoy her company because he lacks friends. An orange-haired man walks away. Damian excitedly suggests they have fun together since the circus is about to start. A sudden, rhythmic click sounding follows the pair as Seline calls out to Damian. Seline invites Damian to the north during summer vacation, and he asks if she will play with him if he visits. Seline explains it is difficult to come alone, but she will join her father if he is allowed to visit the capital. Damian reflects on how Seline's deep love for her home makes it a disadvantage to capture her now. The pair marvels at the circus acts, with Seline amazed by the acrobats and the size of the lions. A sudden, loud screech sounding startles the children as Seline reacts with surprise. Seline is confused to find several adults standing at the entrance. The orange-haired man scolds Seline for breaking her promise, but she denies ever promising to be good. Seline argues she only promised not to trouble the Duke, while the silver-haired woman watches with a sudden, curious tilt sounding. The silver-haired woman lets out a sudden, amused puff sounding as she hides a smile. The woman asks Damian what he is holding, and he confirms the bear is a gift from Seline. Seline gives a sudden, proud pat sounding to the bear and explains she gave her prize to the little Duke. Seline points happily toward the pile of bears she won by throwing medals. The woman chuckles internally, realizing that the bears are all exactly the same. The silver-haired woman asks Seline if she would give a gift really. Seline reacts with sudden shock. Damian initially offers to give the bear away, but then stubbornly refuses. The woman points out that a gift not coming directly from Seline would be meaningless. Celine quickly insists that she assign. Damian remains firm as Seline wonders if his stubbornness is the reason he has no friends. The Duke lets out a sudden, thoughtful sound in. The Duke explains that an escort knight must take care of both the master's body and spirit. The Duke asks Seline what she should do to make Damian comfortable while the boy looks away. Seline confirms she received the teddy bear, and the Duke agrees. The Duke notes she won 4 more bears and asks if they are for her friends in Marianne. Seline looks down, explaining she wanted to share those bears with her friends. Celine's voice sounds small and sad. Seline recalls a happy memory. Seline looks away with sadness. The woman suggests they go out tomorrow to buy more teddy bears together. Seline is immediately excited. Seline clasps her hands together. Seline asks about exclusive bear stores, as the woman suggests they also have delicious dessert while they are out. The pair stands together quietly. The woman thinks about this. Damian blushes and looks away. Damian secretly thinks about dessert. The next morning, Damian describes a parfait to Seline as they stand outside the castle. Damian recalls parfaits after hearing a man mention them. Seline laughs and remarks that Damian's lack of friends makes him a boring boy. The silver-haired woman suggests they all have parfaits today, and Damian excitedly agrees. Seline turns her back to Damian with a sudden, quick whoosh sudden. Seline addresses the boy as Little Duke, catching him by surprise. Seline enthusiastically declares she will accompany him so he won't be lonely, though Damian senses a misunderstanding. A servant requests that the silver-haired woman enter the horse-drawn carriage. A white-gloved hand is offered with a sudden, gentle-sounding movement. Seline reaches out with a sudden, firm grab. Seline hops into the carriage with a sudden, quick whoosh sounding, insisting she is no longer a child. Damian lets out a sudden, amused puff sounding, while Seline reacts with a sudden, excited wow sounding from inside. The group arrives at a famous parfait shop on a bright bay. The trio walks down a cobblestone street toward their destination. Onlookers are captivated by the sight of the elegant Duchess walking through the common area. Seline asks the Duchess if the constant attention is uncomfortable for her. The Duchess reassures Seline that cold treats are perfect for summer while patting her head. The group reaches the entrance of a building. They step inside as the Duchess mentions her interest in the famous parfaits. A shopkeeper is shocked to see a noblewoman visiting a common street. Seline, the Duchess, and Damian wait together for their treats. The shopkeeper promises to bring 3 parfaits immediately and offers further assistance. Damian stops the shopkeeper, indicating he needs something else. Damian points toward a specific item in the display case. Seline reacts with a sudden, nervous wince sounding as Damian orders a scone. The Duchess is surprised by Damian's request for a scone. Damian clarifies with a sudden, sharp stab sounding that the scone is for Seline, making the girl feel caught. Seline notes that the scone order makes the boy seem like a true little Duke. The Duchess excitedly offers to have her chef make many scones starting tomorrow, but Seline tries to decline. The Duchess dismisses the refusal and remarks on her recognizable status. The Duchess smiles and says there's no need for formal titles between them. Seline is confused about why she would call her friend's mother, Mother. The Duchess expresses her wish that she had a daughter like Seline. A moment of quiet focus rests on a pink sofa. Seline blushes deeply with a sudden, warm blushing sounding. Seline's memories shift to a night scene where her father calls her name. Her orange-haired father sits with her and asks how he should handle the Duke's social invitations. Seline is confused as her father explains the social hierarchy and his duty to the Duke. He explains that the Duke is essentially his king, making a casual friendship impossible. Her father warns her that the Duke's future marriage might introduce a disruptive stepmother figure. He asks Seline how she would feel if he prioritized another woman over her. Her father wonders if she already suspects he has someone else in his life. He looks at her with a stunned expression, questioning her reaction. He quickly clarifies that it was only an example and asks her to forget it. Narrative text explains his anger at the thought of his precious daughter being hurt by public criticism. He mutters a wish that Seline were a boy to avoid such societal burdens. Seline looks on with a sad, tearful expression. A sudden, rhythmic pat sounding followed by a sudden, light drip sounding occurs in the darkness. Back in the shop, the Duchess asks if she said something wrong as Seline is startled. The Duchess apologizes and calls Seline cute while the girl thinks of her father. Seline cries as she reflects on her father's words about her life being better if she were a boy. The Duchess expresses shock at the rumors regarding the Baron and doubts that such a foolish man could be guilty. Seline explains that her father has a woman closer to him than her mother, making the Duchess fume with a sudden low murmuring sounding. Damian enters the room and calls out to his mother. The Duchess composedly invites Damian to join Seline for some dessert. The Duchess offers a delicious strawberry parfait to the crying girl to help her calm down. Seline invites the little Duke to eat his share of the treat. Damian and Seline sit together at the table as they prepare to eat. Damian lets out a sudden, thoughtful sounding while observing Celine's sadness. Damian insists that he will not eat his parfait unless Seline eats hers as well. Damian holds a spoonful of the treat out to Seline and asks her to try it. Seline blushes deeply as she looks at the kind boy. Seline takes a bite with a sudden, quiet munch sounding as Damian smiles warmly. Seline is delighted by the sweet flavor of the parquet. The scene shifts to the Baron looking stressed and nervous. The Duchess demands an explanation from Baron Mars while the Duke looks on. The group sits in a tense, quiet room waiting for the Baron to speak. The Baron decides to reveal the truth and answer their questions. The Duchess bluntly asks the Baron if he is having an affair. The Baron and Duke react with shock as the Baron vehemently denies the accusation. The Duchess slams the table with a sudden, sharp thud sounding. The Duchess scolds the Baron for what she believes was a major life mistake. The Duke's eyes glow with sudden, terrifying intensity as a sudden, sharp whoosh sounding and a sudden, bright flash sounding fill the room. The Duke declares that such actions can only be atoned for with death, leaving the Baron terrified. The Baron maintains his innocence as the Duchess relays Celine's claim about him having another woman in his life. The Duchess adds that Seline believed he wished she were a boy instead of a girl. The Baron reacts with sudden, startled shock sounding as he hears how his daughter misjudged him. The Baron yells in frustration about being unfairly judged. The Baron begs for a chance to clear up the misunderstanding. A sudden, rhythmic click-click sounding accompanies someone entering the room. The Duchess returns with the exhausted men, and the Baron lets out a sudden, tired humph sounding when Seline spots him. The Baron apologizes to Seline and clarifies that he never intended to make her sad. He explains that he never wished for a son and was only worried about the perception of her loyalty. A moment of focus rests on the sweet strawberry treat. The Baron explains that people often mistake close loyalty to the Duke for romantic affection. Seline is surprised by the possibility of being misunderstood by others. The Duke reflects on how feelings can arise when people spend all their time together. Seline makes a firm commitment. Seline declares she will be the Duke's protector and that any feelings beyond loyalty would disgrace her honor as a knight. Damian looks at her with a stunned expression. Damian's gloved hands clench tightly together as he processes her words. Damian lets out a sudden, cheerful ha-ha sounding as he tells everyone not to worry because they are not in that kind of relationship. A pinky finger is held up as Seline prepares to swear an oath. Seline vows that something terrible will happen to her if she ever falls in love with the Duke. The scene shifts to an armory stocked with barrels of arrows. Time has passed and an older Damian stands in the cellar with Seline. Damian looks down at the girl with a gentle, knowing smile. Narrative text explains that the lady's carriage has finally left the castle. The villa returns to its usual quiet state after the lively guests depart. A white-gloved hand holds a sealed envelope. A mature Damian reads the letter with a pensive expression. Seline presents a letter to Duke Sodong. Seline requests that Damian read the secret letter only after she has departed, leaving the boy curious about its contents. Seline turns around with a sudden, quick whoosh sounding. Seline beams with happiness. A gloved hand carefully unseals the secret message. The parchment reveals rows of elegant handwriting. The adult Damian is stunned by what he reads. Seline once poured her heart into writing. Damian reflects on how he already understood her unspoken feelings. Damian sits alone with the letter in hand. Damian struggles to define the complex emotions rising within him. Damian recalls a peaceful moment spent together. Damian remembers Celine's playful and lively personality. Vibrant orange hair catches the light. Celine's radiant smile remains etched in memory. Damian's expression softens with deep longing. A hand rests heavy with thoughts. Damian remains lost in his introspection. Silence fills the magnificent, darkened study. As the clock ticks, Damian wonders if he can finally be honest about his heart. Seline once feared that no one would challenge an inevitable outcome, looking deeply troubled. Determination flickers in Damian's blue eyes. Damian stands tall amidst the shadows of the room. Damian resolves to make the impossible happen for her sake. Damian realizes that simply being capable is no longer enough to reach her. His gaze sharpens with a new purpose. Damian dons a formal white military uniform. A blonde boy suggests Damian move on if he is confused, but the silver-haired noble insists otherwise. Russell Racer, a boy with 4 sisters, notes how much his siblings appreciate receiving gifts. Russell suggests that perfume or flowers are excellent ways to demonstrate care and affection. Damian diligently takes notes on the advice to study further when he returns home. Russell lets out a sudden, surprised wow sounding as he questions Damian's intense desire for friendship. Russell inquires about Damian's rivals and mentions Melissa, while the Duke dismisses the question as he ponders a younger competitor. Damian prepares to leave, causing Russell to ask why he is in such a frantic hurry. Russell pauses to consider his next words. Russell explains that while gifts are effective, choosing the right person to befriend is the priority. Russell emphasizes acting in a way that avoids being disliked by others. Russell warns that doing things others dislike can prevent a relationship from progressing smoothly. Russell provides the obvious example of not lying, while Damian considers the weight of those words. Damian is visibly startled by the mention of lies. Russell points out that liars fail to establish basic trust, making them unpopular. Damian mutters a defense about lying for a justifiable reason. Russell asks for an explanation regarding Damian's lie as the silver-haired boy lets out a sudden, weary ha. Russell declares his intense hatred for people who behave that way. Russell admits that lying specifically for affection gives him the chills, which Damian feels deeply. Damian thinks that if one must lie, it is best to never be caught. Damian lets out a sudden, nervous ha-ha sagging. Damian leans back in his chair, overwhelmed by the situation. Damian stares at his hand in a moment of quiet focus. The mature Duke stands behind the image of the girl he treasures. Damian reflects on Seline's earlier oath and how they may never share a romantic bond. Damian stares intensely ahead with a pensive expression. A sudden, heavy thud sounding echoes as Damian resolves to stop dwelling on the past and focus on moving forward. Damian considers the idea of giving a gift to someone special. Damian decides that since gifts are what Seline cares about most, he should head to the warehouse. Various elegant swords lie scattered across the warehouse floor. Damian holds a longsword thoughtfully. Damian asks if the sword is the only useful item he possesses, and his servant confirms it. Damian asks if he used the sword as a child, but the servant notes he threw everything away. Damian asks about the one valuable item he was told to keep, and the servant recalls its location. A sudden, quiet searching sounding fills the room as the servant asks Damian to wait while he retrieves the extraordinary item. A sturdy wooden chest bound with metal sits on the ground. The servant explains that the item is a one-of-a-kind sword that is exceptionally valuable. A pristine sword rests in the chest, having been kept as a sign of respect for the academy. Damian looks at the legendary sword with deep focus. Damian decides to take the sword, much to the servant's confusion. A sudden, heavy panting sounding follows the servant's shock as he asks if Damian is really giving it away, but the master asserts his ownership. A sudden, quick turning back sounding occurs as the Duchess is startled and asks for an update. The servant reports that Damian is giving away his academy sword, which the Duchess notes was once criticized for being too light. The Duchess realizes Damian intends to give the sword to Seline and decides she cannot simply rest. A sudden, sharp surprise sounding accompanies the Duchess's realization that the gift might be for Baron Mars's birthday. The Duchess questions the timing of the upcoming birthday. The Duchess is shocked to remember that Seline's birthday is also approaching quickly. A sudden, quick jump sounding occurs as the Duchess declares there is no time to waste. The Duchess orders the servant to prepare to leave immediately, leaving the boy confused by the rush. The Duchess looks ahead with intense determination. A bouquet of vibrant red roses sits in a decorative vase. A sudden, warm touch sounding occurs as the Duchess gives Seline an origami flower for her upcoming birthday. Young Seline blushes as she admits her worries over the summer. Narrative text expresses a deep desire to provide a meaningful gift. The Duchess smiles as she remembers personally taking care of the special item. Damian looks nervous and slightly overwhelmed. A sudden, quick throw sounding follows Damian's rejection of a draft that feels too heavy for his message. A sudden, light roll sounding follows as Damian hopes she will love the final result. Damian looks at a birthday card, wishing he had been more honest about his heart in the past. Damian sits alone amidst many crumpled papers in his grand study. A sudden, rhythmic spin sounding accompanies a roll of green fabric. Bella styles Seline's hair, insisting she look beautiful for her birthday, despite the girl's complaints. Bella scolds Seline for wanting to wear drab clothes instead of behaving like a proper noble lady. Bella asks Johann to agree with her assessment of Seline's appearance. Johann admits he prefers Seline's everyday clothes, making Bella regret asking the weapon shop owner's son. Johann adds that the new outfit also suits her, but Seline remains focused on her dream of being a knight. A sudden, sharp clap sounding follows Bella's demand for Seline to stop complaining and enjoy her day.
Seline looks stunning with her hair styled and her green dress on.
Seline thanks her friends as she prepares to leave for the other. A sudden, rhythmic click-clack sounding of footsteps causes Seline to pause in surprise. The Duke's ornate carriage arrives at the location. Narrative text suggests it is an unexpected time for the Duke to arrive. Seline walks along the cobblestone street toward a white-haired man. A sudden, respectful bow sounding follows Seline's polite greeting to the Duke. Seline approaches as Duke Sagong mentions he has something special to show her, prompting her to ask what it could be. Duke Sogong commands his butler to bring the item, and Baron Mars respectfully acknowledges the order. Maids approach with a rhythmic and heavy step sounding as they carry a large tray. A beautiful red dress and matching black shoes are presented amidst a sudden melodic laugh sounding. Seline is visibly confused as Duke Sogong explains the gift is from the Duchess in gratitude for the flowers Seline gave her. Narrative text explains that while most flowers eventually wither, Seline's gift remains fresh and brings the Duchess great comfort. Seline insists her gift was minor compared to the Duke's help, but he notes she rarely gets the chance to dress so elegantly. Duke Sogong invites her to wear the outfit when she visits, and Seline happily asks for confirmation before beaming with joy. Seline lets out a sudden, quick run sounding as she rushes to ask her mother for permission to visit Calathea, while the Duke plans to present more gifts later. A sudden, surprised, sounding escapes Baron Mars as he asks if the young Duke also sent a gift, which Duke Sogong confirms. Duke Sogong suggests they had inside, noting it has been a long time since he last dined at the Baron's residence. Celine's mother smiles warmly as she asks her daughter what she wishes for this year. Seline enthusiastically declares her wish is to become even better at cutting things in half with her sword. Duke Sogong makes a sudden, quick turn sounding toward the group. The Duke presents a sturdy wooden chest, explaining it is a joint gift from himself and Damian. Seline looks back at the Duke, surprised that the gift is from both of them. Duke Sogong encourages her to open it, confident that she will be pleased with the contents. Seline gasps in shock and delight as she looks into the chest. Narrative text reveals that the sword is a gift from Damian, while the scabbard was provided by the Duke. The Duke explains the scabbard is made of a special Academy metal that is exceptionally light and easy to carry. A sudden, sharp sounding occurs as Baron Mars protests that the gift is too much to accept, but the Duke dismisses his concerns. Duke Sogong lets out a sudden, cheerful ha-ha sounding while thinking that if the Baron knew the sword came from the principal, he would be overwhelmed. Seline looks at her father with wide, hopeful eyes. A sudden, soft, emotional sounding fills the air as the Duke notes Seline is ready to begin practicing with real weapons. Baron Mars lets out a sudden, nervous sounding as he struggles with the weight of the decision. The Baron finally relents, admitting he has no choice but to accept the generous gift. Baron Mars sternly warns Seline that the sword will be confiscated if she is reckless, and she promises to be careful. A sudden, joyful hooray sounding follows as the Baron suggests practicing, and Seline thanks him excitedly. Seline's mother lets out a sudden, light ho-ho sounding as Seline makes a sudden, quick runaway sounding with her new sword. A sealed letter rests inside the red-lined chest next to where the sword was held. Seline notices the envelope and curiously asks if it is a letter. Seline finds a thorough training schedule on the back of the page, wondering at the extra details provided. As Seline reads the message about her persistence, she reflects on the encouragement she has received. Determination flares in Seline as she shouts that she absolutely cannot give up on her dreams. The blade of the new sword shines brightly under the clear sky. Seline marvels at how light the metal sword feels in her hands compared to her usual training weapon. She feels a deep connection to the blade, as if it were custom-made just for her. Russell Racer asks what kind of lady could have changed the famous Damian Willow so much. Narrative text suggests Damian's skills might be declining if he needs to practice with others in the north. Russell is confused by the suggestion that Damian's skills aren't improving, wondering who could possibly think that. Damian scolds Russell for reading his letters without permission, though Russell notes he followed the advice. A sudden, thoughtful, sounding comes from Russell as he asks if Damian is planning a winter trip to the north. A sudden, dismissive ignore sounding occurs as Damian refuses to engage with Russell's teasing. Russell dreams of relaxing in the south, while Damian continues a sudden, quiet, not listening sounding behavior. Russell becomes very interested in the north, and Damian realizes his plan to lure the boy there has worked. Damian agrees to let Russell come along, but specifies that there is a certain condition. An ornate carriage travels through a heavy winter snowstorm. Damian plans to play the role of a weak, innocent person who cannot even swing a sword. Damian wonders if bringing Russell is wise while he prepares to lie for the sake of his act. Russell winks confidently, promising to match Damian's acting perfectly as they prepare for their journey. A title card introduces Marianne's winter. Snow falls over a quiet village. Russell glances back at the surroundings. Russell counts the group of children, noting there are 2 boys and 3 girls. Russell narrows his focus, excluding the smallest girl from his search for Damian's interest. Russell concludes that either the pink-haired or red-haired girl must be Damian's lover. A sudden, rhythmic clack sounding of footsteps accompanies Russell's attempt to identify Seline Mars. A sudden, soft, gently sounding occurs as Russell takes a girl's hand, noting the weight of her noble title. Russell offers a formal and respectful greeting to the young lady. Russell performs a theatrical bow and kisses the hand of the pink-haired girl. Bella is frozen in complete horror. A loud scream echoes from the house. A sudden, quick dust-off sounding follows as Bella frantically cleans her hand. Shivering with intense disgust, Bella finds the theatrical display cringeworthy despite the pleasant weather. Damian asks if he made a mistake, and Russell bluntly confirms that Damian approached Bella instead of Seline. Russell dismissively compares Celine's appearance to a commoner while wondering if she truly wrote the letter. Narrative text explains that Russell initially suspected the newcomers might be troublesome people. An internal voice questions the loyalty of an ally who seems to be ruining the plan. Russell gestures dramatically as he shouts. A sudden sharp glance sounding accompanies Russell's mockery of a perceived weakness. The local children look on with deep frustration as the uninvited guests act unfriendly. Russell poses confidently as dissatisfaction grows. Russell asks for validation of his performance, admitting he is acting without knowing the full truth. A challenge is issued for a game of stone throwing. Russell asks if Seline knows the game, prompting Bella to boast while Seline eagerly offers to teach the young Duke. Russell explains the rules of skipping stones on water, and Damian pleasantly acknowledges the simple fun of it. Damian asks for Celine's record, and she proudly claims 5 skips while noting she is second only to Johann. Russell prepares to break the record while fully immersing himself in his arrogant role. Russell selects a handful of flat stones for his turn. A sudden, quick whoosh sounding follows Russell's throw, which skips multiple times as the children watch in shock. Johann is stunned by the record. Russell smugly challenges Damian to do better. An internal voice mockingly expects failure from someone who never does anything correctly. A sudden, heavy fuming sounding accompanies Celine's rising anger. Seline shouts for the behavior to stop. A sudden, sharp, annoyed sounding occurs as Seline confronts Damian, though she worries her upset face looks terrible. Seline flees into the snowy woods. Damian calls out to Seline in surprise. A sudden, quick panic sounding follows Russell's confusion over the sudden outburst. Bella looms behind Russell and suggests they have a private conversation. A sudden, quick, startled sounding escapes Russell. The scene shifts to the forest. Seline sits alone under a tree. A sudden, soft, gently sounding occurs as a hand reaches out toward the girl. Damian finds Seline and gently announces his presence. Damian points out Celine's bleeding knee, which she dismisses as a minor fall. Damian kneels down to help her. Damian asks if her upset is because he isn't as skilled as Russell. Seline firmly denies that his skill is the issue. A sudden, light sniff sounding accompanies Celine's admission that she simply dislikes Damian's friend. Damian questions Russell's intelligence and declares that those who speak poorly of others are not true friends. Seline admits she only competed so intensely as a bodyguard because she wanted to pinch Russell's nose. Damian smiles privately while thinking about how good of a person Seline is without even realizing it. A sudden, heavy thud sounding punctuates Celine's demand that Damian stop being friends with the rude boy. Damian agrees that he does not need bad friends and sits beside Seline as she suggests. Russell worries in isolation about his performance and wonders when Damian will return to the group. An unseen child reminds the others that friends should not be teased even if they play poorly. A sudden, light aha sounding occurs as the local children scold Russell for his discouraging attitude toward Damian. Russell is confused by the children's insults and insists he was only following the orders he was given. A sudden, sharp ha sounding escapes as someone notices that Seline and Damian have finally returned from the woods. Seline apologizes for her sudden departure as the group of local children gathers around the returning pair. A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows as the pink-haired girl pushes Russell forward to offer his apology. Russell acts shyly and holds back as he prepares to face the consequences of his actions. Damian offers a sincere apology to Seline, leaving her surprised and asking for the specific reason behind it. Russell laughs nervously and blames his neglect of Damian on his commitment to playing an antagonistic role. Russell admits he got too into his character and asks Seline if she sincerely accepts his apology. Seline pulls her hand back and rejects the gesture as a character suggests moving past the conflict. Seline firmly declares that it is too late and that she has already decided to end their friendship. Damian smiles broadly while standing protectively behind the red-haired girl. Damian reaffirms his decision to cut ties with anyone who treats him and his friends with such carelessness. A bright, sparkly atmosphere surrounds Damian and Seline as they stand united in their decision to end the friendship. The pink-haired girl whispers a command for Russell to reveal the secret he has been holding back. Russell clenches his fist in frustration while deciding whether or not to speak the truth to his friends. Fear and desperation fill Russell as he shouts a promise to never do it again and begs for forgiveness. A sudden, thoughtful, sounding escapes Seline as she carefully considers Russell's desperate plea for mercy. Damian gazes at Seline and expresses a secret internal wish for her to think of him more often. Seline considers waiting before making a final decision, fearing that letting the relationship worsen further would be bad. Seline issues a final warning for Russell to never repeat his behavior and asks for his confirmation. Russell looks down sadly and prepares to ask for one final favor from his group of friends. Seline observes Russell and reflects on the possibility that his abrasive behavior stems from deep loneliness. Seline asks Russell if he can commit to being a truly good friend to Damian from now on. Russell is left blankly staring in shock after hearing Celine's unexpected request for his genuine friendship. A narrative prompt appears in the air, urging the two boys to finally shake hands and make up. Peace finally returns as the children sit together on the wooden dock and enjoy an afternoon of fishing. Narrative text explains that after the apology, the children's attitudes toward each other became much friendlier. The group lies in the snow together as a voice reflects on how interesting hanging out with nobles is. A close-up reveals intense focus as Russell watches his companions with a sense of growing interest. Damian looks at his friend and sternly asks how much longer he plans on maintaining his deception. Russell mentions hearing that Seline will eventually become Damian's personal bodyguard knight in the future. Damian acknowledges that his true skills will eventually be discovered, but asks if his friend can handle the truth. A calm and knowing smile returns to Damian's face as he navigates the complex social situation. Damian thinks about the irony of eventually revealing his status as a swordsmanship genius to his unsuspecting friends. Damian grips his hand firmly while deciding that it is still too soon for a full revelation of his talent. Damian decides to keep his true abilities a secret until he is absolutely sure he wants to reveal them. A sudden, quiet sounding follows Russell's internal thought that revealing the truth now might be acceptable. Hopes are voiced that Seline will not get mad if a proper apology is finally delivered to her. Russell reflects on his sharp eye for people while watching Damian's cold heart begin to soften toward others. Narrative text recalls the first time the speaker met Damian immediately after his acceptance into the academy. A young Damian is described as a dry and boring boy with no apparent interest in the world. Narrative text explains Damian's talent for appearing friendly like a winter breeze whenever it suits his specific needs. Russell maintains a sincere and firm resolve. Damian laughs as a narrator's proverb questions if a thirsty person can find what they seek. Russell mentions that the Northern Night School has just begun its break. Russell asks for advice on how to win over a girl while facing questions with no clear answers. Letters and crystals are treated like precious treasures. Damian stares forward with intense, focused surprise. Narrative text explains that spring has finally arrived in that place. A map of the landscape accompanies notes on the commoner status of Baron Mars's mother. Narrative text predicts that families will eventually strive to marry into the duchy. Damian looks out at the academy and thinks that achieving such status will not be easy. Russell looks at Damian and asks why he is being stared at in such a way. Upon arriving at the palace at night, the boys are told to hurry and exit the par. Russell encourages Damian to hang in there, though Damian is confused by the sudden support. Narrative text recalls Celine's first invitation to the Duke's manor in Calathea. Marianne's village thrives in health and peace. Narrative text explains that Johann, Bella, and Seline are completing their introductory academy courses. Bella examines fine dresses while Johann works. Narrative text asks if the snowy mountains near Marianne's place are remembered. Narrative text expresses worry because annual reconnaissance teams have gathered no information. Desks are covered in letters regarding plans for a northern vacation. Ornate domes cap the majestic palace rooftops. Soft pink clouds drift across the sky. Seline Mars has grown to 15 years old. A mature Russell holds a white gift. Seline watches Russell and wonders how long he intends to maintain his gentle smile. Russell congratulates Seline on becoming the valedictorian once again. Russell presents a gift to Seline as a reward for being an excellent student. Seline asks if the gift is a hair tie, but Russell tells her she is wrong. A sudden bright shine sounding occurs as Russell presents himself with confidence. Russell explains that the gift is a special oil meant for maintaining her sword. Seline expresses her thanks and promises to provide feedback after she returns to Marianne. Russell asks Seline if she plans on replacing the sword she has used for a long time. Seline replies that the sword suits her so well that switching would be a waste. Seline thinks that the sword seems to adjust its length to her height, though she doubts it is possible. Seline decides to use the sword during her training and hopes to keep it well preserved. Russell looks down with a knowing, soft expression. Russell asks if Seline will join the night squad after training, and she confirms she needs no more courses. Russell looks at the academy buildings and admits that it is a very good place. Russell acknowledges her decision with a simple understanding. Seline pauses and looks at her friend curiously. A thought bubble explains that an escort for a duke must know more than just swordplay. Russell tells Seline that not taking advanced courses while in her position would be a waste. A pale hand rests on the balcony. Russell suggests that an opportunity more helpful than studying under the Baron might come along. Seline stands in silent, contemplative shock. Seline reflects on a time when she believed Calathea was the biggest place in the world. The pair gazes out over the landscape. Seline realizes there are many places in the world bigger and more wonderful than Calathea. Seline smiles as she finds common ground. A thought bubble reflects on the Mars family being the only nobles in Marianne, despite their low baronial rank. A white-haired man reflects on finally achieving a goal he has long dreamed of. A light hee-hee sounding follows Seline's reassurance that she is happy with her current opportunities. Seline smiles contentedly with her eyes closed. Russell expresses his desire to grow into someone capable of assisting Damian in the future. A quiet conversation on the palace balcony explores the possibility of mild regret over past choices. A soft mumble sounding accompanies Russell's skeptical response to Seline's previous claims. Russell invites Seline to extend her vacation because the rest of the group misses her. Seline reacts with surprise and asks for the reasoning behind her friend's sentiments. Russell offers a gentle and knowing smile to his companion. A heavy darkness begins to descend over the shifting scene. A sudden deep rumble sounding vibrates through the shias. A sudden bang sounding echoes as Russell insists his proposal is not a joke. Russell stands firmly with his arms crossed in the dimly lit room. The white-haired man looks down with a grim and serious expression. An official is shocked to receive a formal resignation letter for immediate processing. Russell gazes out at a violent lightning storm through the tall mansion windows. A final, ominous command urges the characters to make a wise and calculated decision. The scene shifts to the imposing stone towers of the Northern Night School. A red-haired woman enters the office and asks the principal the reason for her summons. The principal clarifies that Seline has done nothing wrong and has actually achieved something great. Both red-haired characters react with wide-eyed shock and utter confusion. The principal acknowledges Seline's initial decision to skip advanced courses while discussing a new offer. A quick swish sounding occurs as the principal prepares to reveal a stunning development. The principal presents a rare recommendation letter, citing it as an unprecedented historical event. Narrative text explains that transfer students are granted a full scholarship with no tuition costs. The blonde principal stresses that Seline is being offered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The red-haired mother worries about the financial difficulty of securing a residence in the capital. Concerns are voiced about the safety of sending Seline to the capital city alone. Seline decides to carefully consider the transfer offer before providing an answer. Seline lies awake in bed while dressed in her long white nightgown. Intense green eyes stare upward as Seline grapples with her internal conflict. A restless tossing sounding follows Seline's thoughts on the superior education she would receive. Seline realizes that improving her skills at the academy would allow her to better support Damian. A single lingering doubt surfaces as Seline continues her late-night contemplation. Seline is distressed by the realization that the school lacks a dormitory for its students. The red-haired girl pulls her covers up while trying to find a solution to her housing problem. A soft hugging sounding occurs as Seline clutches her pillow tightly while wishing for advice. Seline laments not having anyone familiar with the academy to consult about her situation. The young noble girl stares into the distance with a troubled and pensive look. Damian leans his chin on his hand with a serene and satisfied smile. Damian's mother notes his unusual happiness and he asks about available rooms in the mansion. Damian requests that one of the best guest rooms be prepared and thoroughly cleaned. The white-haired woman relaxes on the sofa and asks if an important guest is expected. A sudden, startled sounding accompanies Damian's proposal to let Seline stay at their mansion. Damian shares his knowledge of Seline's transfer offer while looking cheerful and optimistic. Damian's mother discusses the difficulty of a baron's family housing situation in the capital city. A question is raised regarding whether Seline's mother is aware of the proposed living arrangement. The woman reflects on how wonderful it is that Damian has considered the problem so carefully. Damian remains confident that providing Seline a place to stay is the perfect solution. A joyful laugh sounding erupts as Damian beams with pure happiness over his plan. The white-haired woman stares forward with intense green eyes and a determined expression. In a lavish room, the white-haired woman rests on a red sofa while a man stands nearby. The lady directs her staff to redecorate a room opposite Damian's for an incoming guest. A warm and satisfied smile crosses the white-haired woman's face. Seline trembles as she holds a letter, her red hair cascading over her shoulder. Seline's attention is taken by a sudden, soft pat sounding as she drops her document. Narrative text explains that the wife has already prepared a room for Seline. The white-haired man sits with Seline and mentions that his wife has already decorated her room. Seline worries about being a burden, but the man insists having her is actually lucky for them. The man explains that the world is changing, causing Seline to look on with a worried expression. Narrative text suggests Damian might live in the capital and entrust the north to others. The white-haired man closes his eyes in a moment of quiet reflection. A soft clink sounding accompanies the man's suggestion that Seline should become familiar with the capital. He explains that staying by Damian's side requires understanding the relationships of nobles in the capital. Seline's green eyes widen in shock as she absorbs the weight of his advice. A sudden, firm clenching sounding occurs as the text urges seizing opportunities when they appear. Seline looks away while reflecting on how this choice is also for her own future. Seline remembers her younger self holding a sword amidst a field of white flowers. A vision of a younger, joyful Seline flashes by with a radiant smile. Seline firmly declares her intention to enroll in the academy. The white-haired man praises Seline for her thoughtful decision while sitting in his study. Narrative text offers reassurance that Seline will excel at the academy without need for worry. A warning follows that she will be incredibly busy until the summer arrives. A soft sobbing sounding breaks the air as Bella asks if they really have to leave. Seline stands with her friends, wondering if Bella is going to be all right. A sudden, nervous gulp sounding occurs as the pink-haired girl is told she doesn't look well. Soft footsteps sounding echo as the pink-haired girl admits she doesn't want Seline to go. Worry surface that Seline will adapt quickly to the capital and eventually forget her old friends. Seline offers a gentle smile as she comfortingly pats her friend on the head. Narrative text predicts that Seline is destined to go much further than any of them. The pink-haired girl insists that true friends must support Celine's path forward. A quick nodding sounding follows as the black-haired boy shows his silent agreement. A soft, tight holding sounding occurs as Seline grasps her friend with conviction. Seline and the pink-haired girl share a look of deep mutual understanding. Chibi Johan promises to eventually find a high-quality weapon for Seline to use. Seline stands with poise and determination as she prepares for her new journey. A bright smile lights up Celine's face amidst a backdrop of blooming red flowers. A sudden, bumpy, restless sounding vibrates through the carriage as the journey begins. Seline sits quietly in the carriage, gazing out at the passing landscape. Narrative text recalls her mother's teary eyes throughout the entire farewell journey. Seline remembers her father silently stroking her hair with a deeply sorrowful look. The memory of her friends grieving in their own ways lingers in Celine's mind. A sudden, quiet rustle sounding breaks the silence within the moving carriage. Seline holds her teddy bear close and tells herself that everything is okay. Seline curls up against her bear and whispers that everything will turn out fine. Damian lies peacefully in his bed while the room remains shrouded in darkness. A sudden waking sounding follows as Damian opens his eyes with a weary expression. Damian sits up in bed with a tired groan sounding. Damian stands before the large, ornate doors of his room in the quiet mansion. Damian stares intently at the door of the room directly across from his own. A sudden, sharp click sounding occurs at the ornate door. The white-haired boy reflects on how his serious hobby is progressing. He notes that Seline has a hidden soft spot for cute things despite her outward appearance. A soft sounding accompanies the boy's focused gaze. An unseen woman mentions Celine's arrival later that afternoon and suggests the boy should sleep. The white-haired woman walks gracefully through the manor's decorated hallway. She warns that he should rest to avoid greeting Seline with dark circles under his eyes. The woman acknowledges his eagerness to be the first one to welcome Seline. She tells him she will see him again at mealtime. The woman leads the white-haired boy out of the room. A sudden, sharp pop sounding occurs as the white-haired woman stops. A restless sounding follows as the chibi woman reacts with comedic distress. The woman wonders if kids take jokes too seriously and questions their interests. A thought bubble expresses sympathy for a friend who has had a tough time. A sudden, sharp crunch sounding occurs as the gloved hands clap to gather everyone's attention. Seline arrives in a lavish carriage and is greeted at the mansion entrance. The red-haired girl stares forward with a look of wide-eyed surprise. A line of servants welcomes Lady Mars to the red brittle Willow Castle. Chibi friends present a welcome cake to the bewildered Seline. The white-haired woman cheerfully urges Seline to light the candle on her cake. An unseen speaker asks for Celine's opinion on her current surroundings. A soft "ha" sounding accompanies Damian showing Seline her lavishly decorated bedroom. Seline looks at the beautiful room and admits that she likes it. Seline mentions that any room would have been fine for her stay. Damian insists that Seline is too special to be given a random room. The white-haired woman suggests they should go out together the next day. Seline is told that her parents provided money so she will be financially secure. The woman stresses that their noble status allows for such comforts while Seline remains modest. The woman recalls Celine's initial refusal to take advanced courses despite her husband's persuasion. A ridiculous sounding accompanies Celine's blushing worry that she is being a burden. Damian looks flustered while suggesting they are just acquaintances. A soft sob sounding occurs as the chibi woman laments their lack of closeness. A sudden, brief look sounding follows as the woman glances toward her son. The woman admits she was joking and will handle all school essentials herself. Seline asks if she can use her parents' money for vacation gifts instead. Damian asks if she is feeling uneasy about living away from home for the first time. Damian explains that building relationships at the academy is a key part of his responsibility. Seline listens with a serious and contemplative expression. Sunlight streams through the large manor window. Hands adjust the collar of a high-quality uniform. Seline wears her new academy uniform. Seline reflects on the superior quality of the uniform compared to her old training gear. A sudden, sharp, startled sounding occurs as Damian checks if Seline is awake. A sudden, quick dash sounding follows as Seline hurries toward her friend. Damian is surprised to see Seline already awake and fully dressed. Damian claims he never oversleeps, despite Celine's memories of his long summer vacations. Damian asks if Seline is scared to live with people she hasn't seen in years. Damian reassures her that establishing connections is part of his duty at the academy. Seline responds with a bright and happy smile. Damian gazes at her with a stunned and captivated expression. Damian and Seline share a warm smile together. Damian explains that the classrooms are located in this direction. Damian points out the path as they walk through the academy. Seline identifies the tall white tower standing against the blue sky. Seline addresses Damian as they continue their walk. Chibi Damian mentions that the tower seems to be mostly unused. Damian notes that the tower's 30 floors could provide excellent exercise. Damian jokes that few nobles in the capital value exercise as much as Seline. Damian explains that the upper floors are empty because few central nobles pursue research careers. Damian shares that the assistant rooms will eventually be moved into the tower. Seline gazes up at Damian with an expression of quiet curiosity. Seline reflects that she would request a room on the 30th floor if she were an assistant. A sudden blazing sounding erupts as Seline resolves to put in extra effort to maintain her strength despite the academy's limited physical curriculum. A sudden soft puffed sounding occurs as Chibi Damian struggles to hold back a laugh. Seline informs Damian that she is heading to her class. Seline decides to review her books before the teacher arrives. A sudden rhythmic tremble sounding vibrates through Chibi Damian as he continues to suppress his laughter. A sudden sharp creak sounding echoes as the classroom door is opened. Seline surveys the grand classroom where she will be studying from now on. Seline reinforces her determination to practice hard and stay ahead of her peers. Seline looks surprised as she senses someone approaching. The youngest daughter of Duke Arsum stands poised with golden curls and purple eyes. The blonde girl questions if the rumors she heard are actually true. Seline looks on with a startled and wide-eyed expression. Seline introduces herself to the group for the first time. A sudden, firm hold sounding occurs as Seline offers her hand and expresses hope for a good relationship. A sudden, light giggle sounding ripples from the background as the blonde girl looks on with a mocking expression. A sudden, sharp chuckle sounding breaks from the blonde girl as she looks down at Seline. Seline's green eyes narrow with focus and resolve. A blonde-haired boy with red eyes enters the room and expresses surprise at Damian's arrival. Damian mentions giving Seline a tour while the blonde boy questions if it was the right time for that. A sudden, soft plop sounding occurs as the blonde boy asks about the document on the desk. Damian looks at the paper with a confused and disinterested expression. A sudden loud whoa sounding escapes the blonde boy as he insists that investigating Seline's ability to get along with others is unnecessary. A sudden, sharp smack sounding echoes as the blonde boy facepalms in exasperation. Narrative text notes that Seline is the first country lady to transfer, and her constant presence with the young duke has drawn much attention. Seline and Damian are remembered walking together through the academy grounds. A sudden, frustrated arg sounding follows as the blonde boy warns that many girls are becoming extremely jealous. Chibi Damian remains confident that Seline can handle herself and will not be treated unfairly. Damian suddenly stops as he realizes Seline might actually be the one to attack Lady Arsum if provoked. A sudden, rapid run sounding repeats as Damian and the blonde boy dash through the hallways. A piercing scream rings out, startling the two boys as they reach the room. The blonde boy looks on with a shocked and fearful expression. A sudden, loud bang sounding occurs as Damian and his friend burst through the doors. A girl with purple hair cries out in distress over a spilled drink. Seline stands with a shadowed face, looking down at the floor. Seline looks up in surprise and questions why Damian and Russell have suddenly appeared. Damian and Russell stare forward with completely stunned and bewildered expressions. The classroom sits in silence as Seline remains at her desk surrounded by her new classmates. Seline observes that she does not feel as excluded as she expected, but also that no one is approaching her, while her imagination pictures classmates mocking her with a series of soft KK soundings. Seline wonders if this is the art of aristocratic communication until a sudden, loud ack sounding startles her from her desk. A white bird flies through the sky. Someone frantically calls for a manager. A sudden, sharp slam sounding occurs as the bird crashes into the window. A sudden, soft fall sounding follows as the bird collapses and Seline cries out in alarm. A sudden, rhythmic step sounding echoes as Seline approaches a student who is cowering behind her desk in fear. A sudden, firm grab sounding occurs. Seline explains that a sparrow calms down when its eyes are covered, holding her hands over the student's eyes. The girls stare at Seline with expressions of pure adoration. A sudden, soft smile sounding follows. Three blushing girls are completely captivated. A sudden, loud whoa sounding follows as an observer finds the scene amazing. Chibi Seline finishes explaining how the events unfolded. The white-haired woman enthusiastically expresses her desire to see Seline's amazing appearance in person, while Seline looks on with a sweat drop. The Duchess recounts how Damian saw the classroom situation and told Seline to have fun before leaving, prompting Seline to ask if he really did that. Seline asks why everyone around seemed surprised, and the woman confirms that their reaction was natural. Academy interest in swordsmanship remains high. Seline resolves to practice with others whenever she has time, and even set up a history study group. A sudden, soft-touched sounding follows. The woman admits it is a pity, while Seline insists that her promise remains her top priority. A sudden, tight squeeze sounding follows as the Duchess hugs Seline and gushes over how adorable she is. The woman remarks that it is rare for a young lady of Seline's age to dress so simply. The Duchess suggests hiring a specialist for hair and makeup, but Damian's bubble rejects the idea. Damian leans forward with calm composure. A sudden, sharp, startled sounding occurs as the Duchess asks Damian when he arrived, and he reveals he has been there for a while. Inner beauty is vital for knights. Damian asks for Seline's agreement, and she confirms his sentiment with a day's pluck. Damian reflects on how Seline already makes a good impression without makeup, and notes that it would be troublesome if she started wearing it. A sudden, sharp clack sounding occurs as the mother agrees with his idea, but adds a caveat. The Duchess watches with elegant grace. Hands elegantly hold a decorative teacup. The Duchess explains that a suitable appearance will only serve to further highlight Seline's inner beauty. Seline is shocked when the Duchess announces she plans to prepare a dress for Seline's debutante ball. The Duchess reminds Seline of her age and begins checking the registration details for the ball. A sharp gaze watches with focus. Damian asks about the sudden plan and warns that Seline entering high society will draw unwanted attention from many nobles. The Duchess praises Seline's progress while Damian looks on with a skeptical and blue-tinted expression. Supporting Damian requires knowing his associates. Cavalier duties announced for the ball. Stunned disbelief fills his widened eyes. Punctuation marks emphasize the sudden shock. The Duchess playfully notes that Damian can refuse the request. A sudden, sharp anger sounding follows as the Duchess threatens to ask Count Ryder's son instead, causing a vein to pop on Damian's forehead. Damian grumpily agrees to do it while his mother celebrates her successful provocation. A sudden, bright sounding accompanies Lady Arsum asking Seline if she is also participating in the debutante. The girls relax on the grass. Lady Arsum criticizes the idea of wearing a random outfit to a once-in-a-lifetime party. Seline feels unsure about the ball. The blonde girl recommends Madame Lombardi for her impeccable taste and comfortable dress designs. Seline questions whether she should spend money on an expensive dress that she will rarely have the chance to wear. The group reacts with stunned silence to her practical concerns about high society fashion. The Duchess warns Seline Mars that a young noblewoman who does not prioritize beauty every day and debut in a new dress will face mockery from her peers. The Duchess emphasizes that the failure to dress appropriately will negatively affect the reputation of her chaperone and her cavalier as well, leaving Seline worried. Seline sits alone on the floor as she contemplates the heavy social pressure of her upcoming debut. Seline's eye reflects a burning determination as the Duchess declares the current situation to be completely unacceptable. A frantic voice calls out for Damian and the Duchess, interrupting the moment. Russell approaches the white-haired Damian and asks if he is doing all right, noticing the heavy, gloomy energy surrounding him. Russell is terrified by Damian's intense aura as the boy admits he was completely manipulated by the allure of the title Cavaliere. Narrative text details Seline's journey as she selects new dresses, purchases accessories, and occasionally studies the complex etiquette of central nobles. A close-up highlights Seline's green eyes wide with focus during her intense lessons. The Duchess watches over Seline's progress with a blissful and proud expression. Seline looks completely overwhelmed and shocked by the demanding nature of her new lifestyle. A sudden, loud thud sounding accompanies a firm step as Seline begins the physical portion of her training. Seline stands ready in her simple practice attire, focused on mastering the required movements. Narrative text explains that the dance requires maintaining consistent steps until the music ends and staying perfectly in sync with an opponent. Seline practices her ballroom footwork with a tall, blonde instructor. Seline reflects that the high intensity and precision of the dance make it feel exactly like a sword fight. Seline resolves to succeed and encourages herself to push through the difficulty. Seline walks through the dark halls while reflecting on how she should have performed her steps better. Chibi Seline cries and apologizes for repeatedly stepping on her teacher's foot, while the instructor offers reassurances of her perfection. Seline clenches her fist and decides that now is the time for focused practice rather than complaints. Seline focuses all her energy on practicing her footwork to overcome her current mistakes. A mental image reminds Seline that nothing is impossible as long as she tries her absolute best. Damian sits alone in his dimly lit study, engrossed in reading a large book. Damian's attention is caught by a sudden sound vibrating from the room next door. Damian stands up and questions why Seline has not yet gone to sleep. A sudden, sharp click sounding follows as Damian opens his door, identifying the noise as the sound of Seline practicing her dancing. Damian peeks through a narrow opening in the door to check on Seline. Damian reflects on how Seline rejects his offer to help every time, suspecting she wants to wait until her dance is perfect. A sudden, soft rustle sounding occurs as Damian continues to observe Seline through the crack in the door. Seline looks back in surprise and shock as she senses someone watching her. Seline holds onto her pillow while questioning why she continues to make mistakes despite her focus. Chibi Damian looks on with a flustered and embarrassed expression. Seline clears her throat to announce her presence and confront the intruder. Seline flings the door wide open with an intense and focused expression. Damian looks caught and offers a sheepish greeting. Chibi Seline glares at Lord Damian with an angry aura. Seline scolds Damian for the lack of consideration in peeking into her room, while he apologizes and claims he thought the door was already open. Seline looks away with a resigned sigh. Damian notes the late hour while Seline claims she was simply thirsty and looking for some water. Chibi Seline looks caught as Damian asks if her room ran out of water, clearly knowing she was actually practicing. Damian invites Seline into his room for a drink since he still has water available. Seline sits down and finishes her drink while Damian watches from behind the chair. Seline decides she has had enough to drink while Damian wonders if she thinks he is as stationary as a tree. Damian asks directly if she has been practicing her dancing alone. Seline admits that she keeps making mistakes by stepping on her teacher's foot. Seline looks at Damian and asks if he would be willing to help her practice. Seline notes that Damian is certainly more useful than a pillow for dancing practice. Seline asks if he is skilled enough to offer help, and Damian boasts that he has never once stepped on a partner's foot. A sudden, firm step sounding occurs. Damian extends his hand as a sudden, quick extend sounding echoes, inviting Seline to hold hands. A sudden, soft place on sounding follows as her hand rests on his. Damian and Seline begin dancing together. Damian smiles warmly while they dance. Seline's heart begins to race as a sudden, rhythmic thump-thump sounding fills her chest. Chibi Seline reacts with a sudden sharp ah sounding as she blushes intensely. Seline tells herself to stay focused. They move gracefully across the floor. Damian reflects that if Seline keeps making mistakes, he might have to intervene. Damian calls Seline's name as a sudden, firm grip tight sounding occurs when he holds her hand. Seline looks at him in surprise. Damian pulls Seline close mid-dance. Seline realizes that she finally performed the dance without any mistakes. Seline praises Damian for his amazing dancing, but as a sudden, soft, embarrassed sounding follows, he grumbles that it was nothing special. Damian notes that dancing differs from swordsmanship because the steps must become a habit, leading Seline to ask if he remembers her practice movements. Seline realizes that good dancers possess the necessary qualities to become excellent swordsmen. The two continue their synchronized practice. Damian vows to become much stronger, while Seline expresses her sincere hope that he succeeds. A voice confirms the successful session. A sudden, low frown sounding accompanies Seline's gloomy expression. Damian asks what is wrong since they performed well, and Seline hesitates to answer. Damian notes that the dance teacher will be replaced, while Seline wonders if she can continue practicing with the young duke. Seline asks if she can practice her dancing with Damian starting the next day. Damian looks on with focused intensity. Seline bids Damian farewell as she prepares to leave. Her braided hair is shown clearly. The scene shifts to Madame Longbardier. Madame Longbardier praises the comfort of the gown, noting that it is a signature design of her shop. Seline comments on how much lighter the dress feels compared to what she wore in the north. Madame Longbardier admits the Duchess's requirements were a challenge, as she demanded high-quality fabric and minimal decorations to ensure Seline's comfort and elegance. Madame Longbardier notes that Seline's smooth skin requires no extra embellishments, as a sudden, light fluttering sounding follows. Madame Longbardier is pleased by the perfect fit of the dress on Seline. Seline smiles happily at her reflection. The Duchess announces the need to hire an artist immediately, catching Seline off guard. Seline stares forward with great focus. Narrative text explains that it is a shame her parents cannot attend, but they will be thrilled when they see how beautiful she looks. Seline asks if she can take the dress back north during her break, and the Duchess confirms it is hers to keep. Seline smiles warmly to herself. Seline admits there is someone special she really wants to show the dress to. The Duchess reacts with shocked surprise. The Duchess observes Seline's reaction and concludes that the person she wants to impress is definitely not her parents. A sudden realization strikes the Duchess. The Duchess screams in shock as she wonders if Seline has a boyfriend. A couple stands together in silhouette. Seline looks forward with a smile. Narrative text explains that it is natural for a young Duke of Willow status to be betrothed at his age. The Duchess resolves that she will not blindly force Damian into anything or stand by if he is unhappy. The Duchess playfully admits that she simply enjoys teasing Damian because his reactions are so funny. Seline radiates beauty and quiet confidence. Narrative text emphasizes Seline's deep pride and sense of responsibility in her role as a knight. Narrative text notes that Seline even swore she would never have a romantic relationship with her master, Damian. Bright light filters through the curtains as a thought reflects on how complicated matters of the heart can be. The Duchess asks if the person Seline wants to impress is a lover from the north, and a sudden, heavy panting sounding follows as Seline, shocked, denies it. The silver-haired Duchess reacts with a puzzled and curious expression. The Duchess warns that others will assume she has a lover, while Chibi Seline insists the person is just a childhood friend. Seline recalls a pink-haired friend who loves fashion and decides she wants to show her the dress in person. The Duchess is moved by Celine's loyalty to her friends, and Seline wholeheartedly agrees. Chibi Duchess asks if any of those childhood friends are boys, prompting a flustered Seline to quickly dismiss the idea. The Duchess offers to give the friend a book as an apology as a sudden, quick rustle sounding follows her approach. A close-up shows a thick, dark book with a single paper tucked between its pages. The intricate, patterned cover of the mysterious book is displayed in great detail. The Duchess reflects on her own past ambitions and realizes that people in the North share a similarly determined spirit. The Duchess hands the heavy book over to Seline. Celine's green eyes widen in surprise as she looks up at the Duchess. A close-up highlights the Duchess's composed and elegant features. The Duchess maintains her regal poise during the quiet conversation. Seline responds to the Duchess with a polite and focused acknowledgement. The Duchess remarks that while Seline may not have special feelings now, she will eventually find love and asks Seline to confide in her when she does. Seline is left speechless and wide-eyed by the Duchess's forward request. The Duchess promises to help Seline succeed in love when the time comes, leaving Seline blushing intensely. A close-up focuses on the Duchess's shimmering gold and blue earring. A formal envelope is shown, sealed with a prominent and clean red wax stamp. Seline sits quietly on the sofa while holding the letter she just received. Bright sunlight bathes the ornate exterior of the grand mansion, signaling a beautiful day. Narrative text describes the stark differences in climate and daily habits between the capital and the north. Narrative text predicts that Celine's new look will inspire a nationwide fashion trend. A close-up reveals the delicate and intricate floral lace patterns of the dress. Seline reflects that while the dress is finally finished, there is still a lingering thought on her mind. Seline addresses Madame Longbardier to discuss the final details of the gown. The Duchess and Madame Longbardier stand together as they resolve to make the dress absolutely perfect. Seline beams with joy as she hears that a small adjustment will be made to the waist of the dress. Seline and the white-haired Damian practice their ballroom dancing together in the grand hall. The silver-haired Duchess directs the staff with a focused and busy expression. A close-up shows the elegant ruffles and lace trim at the bottom of Celine's white debutante gown. Narrative text explains that the long-awaited debutante ball is scheduled to begin at around noon. Seline looks gloomy as a sudden, low groan sounding reveals her hunger since she hasn't had breakfast yet. A maid asks Seline what kind of hairstyle she would like to try for the big event. Seline sits among the maids and mentions that her naturally curly hair has limited her styling options in the past. A chibi maid grips a hairbrush as a sudden, sharp determination sounding radiates from her. Damian watches from the doorway and thinks to himself that Seline would look adorable even without any makeup. Damian apologizes for the early morning intrusion, looking slightly guilty. Seline reveals her finished look, stepping forward in her stunning white gown as a sudden, firm step sounding echoes twice. Seline smiles radiantly, her beauty amplified by her long, flowing red hair and delicate accessories. A voice from behind the flowers asks if everyone has been waiting for a very long time. Damian stares at Seline with a look of pure shock and breathless awe. Seline asks if her appearance is strange, and Damian quickly reassures her that the look suits her perfectly. Seline is surprised by everyone's enthusiasm over her simple, long, straight hairstyle. The Duchess approaches Seline with a beaming smile and praises her transformation. The Duchess joyfully exclaims that their little girl has truly become a lady, and Seline offers a sudden, light giggle sounding while thanking her. An elegant green gemstone brooch. Damian adjusts his formal cravat. As they arrive at the mansion, the silver-haired Duchess expresses her deep concern to Seline. The Duchess explains that she is worried because she is Celine's chaperone for the important ball. Inside the carriage, the Duchess advises Seline to be mindful of the many guests attending the event. Seline confirms she has memorized everyone on the guest list. Chibi Seline reacts with a sudden, light blush sounding as she realizes many parents are seeking marriage partners for their children. Seline remains visibly flustered. A voice notes that formal engagements aren't necessary if Seline simply finds a good person to talk to. The Duchess wears a composed expression. Damian mentions to his mother that he does not have a fiancé. Damian stares forward with cold intensity. Damian admits he hadn't considered finding a partner, but the Duchess warns him that men his age without a fiancé are rare. Damian's mother urges him to find a suitable match before it's too late. Damian and Seline enter the ballroom. A voice admires Celine's hair. The blonde-haired Claire approaches and admits that Seline looks surprisingly amazing. Claire suggests that Seline should wear makeup more often, while a sudden, cheerful compliment sounding echoes. Seline thanks Claire and recognizes her beauty, while Claire asks if the man beside her is Damian. Claire introduces herself as Claire Arsum to Damian as a sudden friendly greeting sounding follows. A sudden, sharp zap sounding occurs twice as Damian sternly tells Claire to stop bothering Seline. A sudden crackling zap sounding continues as Damian accuses the girl from the south of being deceitful. Claire reflects on how Damian's friendly public persona is a lie and resents how his presence prevents her from spending time alone with Seline. Claire mentions she is attending with her brother Evan, which sparks Celine's curiosity. Seline notes that Claire's brother is known for being a very promising scholar. Claire explains that since Evan isn't the primary heir, he has much more personal freedom. Claire invites Seline to say hello to her family. A voice flatly denies the request for Seline to leave. Damian stands protectively beside Seline. A voice reminds Claire that debutantes must stay with their chaperones when meeting others. Claire becomes annoyed, insisting she only wanted to introduce her own family members. Damian points out that while introductions are normal, he is Celine's cavalier for the evening. Damian leads Seline away while excusing themselves. Seline calls out Damian's name. A firm command demands that hands be removed. Seline stares at Damian in shock. Damian apologizes and asks if he hurt her as a sudden, quick retract sounding follows his movements. As Seline hesitates with a sudden, soft rubbing sounding, she notes that she has never seen him be so rude to anyone. Damian flinches with a sudden, quick, startled sounding. Damian looks down with focused eyes. A voice emphasizes that a debutante's reputation from this single night will last her entire life. Damian asks Seline if she remembers the advice his mother gave her earlier. Damian asks how others might perceive her actions, but Seline admits she doesn't know. Damian confesses that he intervened to prevent others from bad-mouthing her, even if his actions were a bit extreme. A thought notes that it's highly unusual for people to mistake family members for simple friends. A voice asks if the intervention was meant to ensure a smooth social debut without misunderstandings. Seline looks at Damian with wide eyes. Damian maintains a serious expression. Damian gently asks Seline to stay by his side. A sudden, low whisper sounding accompanies his reminder that it is natural for them to be together. Damian stands closely beside Seline as they navigate the crowded ballroom together. Seline responds with a sudden, gentle nod sounding while focusing on the conversation. A voice mentions that if a suitable match is found, Celine's engagement party could happen as early as next month. The blonde-haired Russell waves energetically as a sudden, bright cheer sounding accompanies his greeting. Russell expresses total shock at Celine's new hairstyle, while Seline notes his arrival and prepares to fetch drinks. Seline giggles happily at the festive atmosphere, though Damian remains serious and focused on his own thoughts. Damian and Russell stand near each other, their attention fixed on Seline as she moves through the hall. Damian and Russell share an intense and competitive stare. A thought bubble suggests that Damian is so protective that not even a male ant would be allowed near Seline. A chibi Duchess scolds the young Duke for his barbaric behavior in refusing to leave Celine's side all night. A chibi Damian uses a polite smile to terrify and chase away any other men who attempt to approach Seline. Damian tells Russell that perceptive guests won't bother them anymore, but Russell questions how Seline will meet others during the partner-swapping dances. Damian's eyes narrow with cold determination as he declares that Seline will never dance with anyone but him. A voice questions Damian's extreme plans and wonders if he truly cares about the rumors his behavior might spark. Seline returns with a radiant smile while holding 2 glasses for herself and her companion. A voice asks Seline if she is genuinely comfortable spending the entire evening exclusively with Damian. A chibi Damian offers a sudden, light giggle sounding, while a frustrated Russell looks on. Damian invites Seline to the dance floor to demonstrate the results of their long practice sessions. The grand ballroom floor is reflected in the polished light as the music begins. Damian explains that while it is customary to change partners after every song, he has other intentions. A sudden, soft whisper sounding follows Damian as he tells Seline that she must stay only with him. Seline looks up at Damian and agrees to stay by his side without any hesitation. Damian's hand brushes against Celine's arm as a sudden, soft rustle sounding marks the quiet moment between them. A voice asks Seline if she has any doubts about the instructions she was just given. Damian and Seline share a long, meaningful look in the middle of the ballroom. Damian places his hand firmly on Celine's waist as they begin their formal dance. Damian's eyes widen in a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as he reacts to Celine's unwavering trust. Damian lets out a sudden, light laugh sounding and admits he finds Celine's absolute obedience to be quite miraculous. Damian looks down at Seline with a soft and contemplative expression. A voice affirms that there is no possible reason to doubt anything Damian says. Seline smiles and notes that while she knows swordsmanship, Damian is the expert on capital society and its people. A close-up highlights Damian's focused and piercing blue eye. Narrative text explains that Celine's natural red hair and honest personality make her the center of attention. Damian's expression darkens as a thought reveals he has begun to feel a deep thirst for something more than just happiness. A silhouetted scene shows Damian watching from a distance as Seline walks with another man. A hand reaches out to move a white chess king, prepared to strike. The white king successfully knocks the black knight off the board in a decisive move. A voice remarks on how incredibly lucky Seline is to have been paired with Lord Damian for the event. Seline beams with pure joy and excitement. Damian offers a rare, gentle smile in return. The silver-haired Duchess observes the festivities from the high balcony with a composed expression. Claire looks on with a visible sense of annoyance and disapproval. Russell takes a calm sip of his drink while watching the scene unfold. The background blurs as a sudden, heavy boom echoes through the area. Claire calls out Celine's name with an urgent and demanding tone. Seline is surprised to see Claire arriving so early, as a sudden, quick thump sounding follows her approach. A voice asks for confirmation regarding the rumor that Seline only danced with one person the previous night. Claire leans in close and stares at Seline with intense curiosity and suspicion. A chibi Claire looks completely exasperated by Celine's lack of social awareness. A voice explains that it is standard for girls in high society to secure a fiancé within 3 seasons of their debut. A voice explains customary partner slopping.
Exclusive dances sparked many rumors.
Claire slams her hands on the desk as a sudden, sharp slap sounding punctuates her frustration with Seline. Seline asks what the rumor means. Seline looks stunned as a voice explains that the rumor of her engagement to the young Duke is not strange at all. Seline frantically denies being engaged to Lord Damian, while Claire notes the weight of a Duke's engagement. A sudden, frantic panic sounding fills the air. Anger flares over the current situation. Claire blames Damian Willow's irresponsible attitude. Claire argues that being his knight doesn't justify ruining Celine's debut, while another girl finds the statement excessive. A sudden, quiet sigh sounding follows. Seline clarifies that Damian was helping her because she had asked him for assistance. The girls listen to her explanation. Claire ponders the word engagement. Claire questions the purpose of Celine's debut, while Seline explains she wanted to learn the social circle she'd protect as Damian's knight. Seline explains she had no intention of getting engaged and doubts anyone from the capital would move to the north. A voice questions her future plans. Seline smiles while holding a puck. Seline asks them to stop bad-mouthing Lord Damian and credits him with a safe social debut. Claire recalls the Duke's focused behavior. Flashback scenes show Damian at the ball. Seline wears a peaceful smile. Seline's green eyes reflect calm focus. Night falls over the cant. A lone tent stands quietly. Sunset paints the academy walls. Damian greets Seline and asks if her class went well. Damian asks why Seline is in such a hurry and invites her to walk together. An ornate carriage waits nearby. Seline appears sad while a thought wonders about events at the academy. Damian looks toward her with concern. Seline mentions that her friends believe continuous dancing is only for engaged couples. Seline points out that he didn't share that information at the time. Damian acknowledges she would have danced with others and notes her tendency to avoid inconveniencing people. Damian apologizes for surprising her and admits he should have explained everything more clearly. Damian asks if they aren't truly engaged, while Seline reacts with a sudden, startled huh sounding. Damian anticipated Celine's predictable response. Damian mentions his distant succession. Damian rests his hand pensively. Damian notes their shared lack of interest in engagement makes it a good choice despite misunderstandings. Damian asks if they should dance separately at future balls, but Seline refuses, so he tells her to dance only with him next time. Seline worries that their behavior might cause people to misunderstand again. Chibi Seline reflects on how easily rumors spread within capital social circles. Seline giggles as she recalls hearing strange rumors about him when they first met. A sudden, light hee-hee sounding follows. Seline asks Damian to inform her if he finds someone he truly likes. Seline suggests they must avoid making his future Duchess uncomfortable, while Damian offers a soft smile. Damian's blue eye gazes intensely. Damian promises that won't happen. Narrative text explains that Damian has solved the immediate problem but worries about how long he can deceive her. Damian stares ahead with a serious expression. Narrative text explains Seline will be 17 after winter break and graduate from the academy. Enduring more years feels like torture. Damian lets out a sudden, heavy sigh, sounding as he reflects on his deepening inner turmoil. A close-up highlights Damian's tilted head and contemplative expression. Damian wonders if his repetitive mental chanting will remain enough to help him maintain his composure around Seline. Damian sits alone on a dark sofa, appearing lost in heavy thought. A black boot makes a firm landing on a bright red step. Seline is warmly greeted by the pink-haired Bella and the black-haired Johann upon her arrival. Seline's friends call out her name as the group shares a sudden, warm hug sounding. Seline explains that she has brought gifts from the capital that various people wanted her to deliver to them. Seline offers Johann a box of iron samples to help with his smithy decisions and gives Bella a book sent by Madame Lombardi. Seline presents a newly published botanical book intended for their friend Chico. The friends react with a sudden, deeply touched sounding as they feel moved by Seline's thoughtfulness. The friends mention they have prepared a gift for Damian's graduation ceremony as a sudden, quick dash sounding follows their departure to fetch it. Seline looks at a beautifully wrapped gift box with a sudden, curious ta-da sounding. Seline presents a selection of sheep's wool socks and gloves that she sheared herself for both her and the Duke. A young girl gifts Seline homemade scones and thanks her as Seline responds with gratitude. Seline notes that the young Duke remained behind to study when asked who was unable to return for the break. Seline reveals that Damian's busy schedule is the specific reason she chose to return home for a visit. Seline explains her desire to find a gift for Damian that carries a deeper symbolic meaning rather than being just a material object. Seline asks for suggestions for her trip to Calathea, while Bella questions if she has decided on a specific type of gift. Bella looks at Seline with a skeptical and pensive expression. Narrative text highlights Celine's determination to find a suitable gift for Damian regardless of the difficulty. A small potted plant with red camellia buds stands against a white background. A red-haired man asks if the precious flower Seline has presented is truly the rare camellia he knows. Seline explains that she personally searched for the flower on a snow mountain because it represents the northern region Damian loves. The man expresses concern for Celine's safety after hearing rumors of strange cries echoing on that mountain. Seline reassures him by explaining she found the flower at a much lower altitude than she originally expected. A hand reaches toward the plant as a sudden, soft reach sounding occurs. A finger grazes a bud as a sudden, light touch sounding marks the quiet moment. Seline looks up with an expression of sudden surprise and realization. The camellia plant begins to emit a faint and mysterious light. Narrative text marks a scene transition to the region of North Calathea. Seline slumps onto the table as a sudden, tired collapse sounding echoes twice. Seline laments that she has visited 10 different shops without finding any suitable gift for Damian. Seline and Bella both appear completely exhausted by the difficult shopping trip. Bella points out that the process is only difficult because Seline is putting so much emotional thought into the choice. Chibi Seline rejects various patterns and items for being too plain or not matching Damian's personality. Seline emphasizes her desire to give Damian something with a truly profound meaning. Bella looks at Seline with a mischievous and questioning gaze. Bella asks if Seline is dating the young Duke while Seline reactively scolds her for making such a weird face. Bella explains that Celine's incredibly careful selection process would make anyone suspicious of her feelings for the Duke. Seline stares back with a sudden, serious-sounding look of frustration. Seline asks about Bella's relationship with Johann as Bella reacts with a sudden, shocked free-sounding. Bella awkwardly denies any romance as a sudden, nervous ha-ha sounding accompanies her claim that everyone is overreacting to rumors. Bella admits that she finds Johann to be a good person, but remains hesitant to change their dynamic. Seline listens to Bella's explanation with a calm and focused expression. Bella reflects on Johann being a very important friend while they sit together in the quiet room. Bella expresses her worry that dating might lead to an argument and a painful breakup. Bella fears that a failed romance could cause her to lose both her closest friend and her lover at once. A close-up shows hands clutching fabric as Bella expresses how lonely she feels after leaving the capital. Seline looks on as Bella wonders if her situation would be less harsh if Johann were not by her side. Seline looks down with a pensive and thoughtful expression. Seline suggests that Bella should take a short break while she checks out a few more stores. Bella looks up from her drink and insists that she wants to go along as well. Seline points out that wearing high heels all day must be making Bella's feet ache. Seline leaves Bella sitting alone at the table to continue her shopping trip. Seline walks away while reflecting on how much trouble Damian's attitude has caused her. Bella offers a comforting smile while telling Seline not to stress over the situation. Narrative text reveals Celine's surprise at learning about the difficulties Bella was facing. Seline reflects on the pain of losing both a friend and a lover as a sudden, quiet sigh escapes her. Seline decides to find a nice gift for Bella before she returns. A variety of unusual items and artifacts sit displayed behind a large glass window. A sudden, resigned, oh well sounding marks the moment Seline stops in front of a shop. Seline spots a pair of ornate ruby cufflinks and realizes they are exactly what she was looking for. Seline steps through a dark doorway to enter the mysterious shop. Seline is startled to see a hooded man already inside and asks how he got in. Seline repeats her question with confusion as a sudden, heavy footsteps sounding echoes through the room. Seline looks at the man with a blank, flat expression after his nonsensical answer. Seline loudly demands that the man sell her the item she saw displayed in the window. The green-haired man explains the cufflinks aren't for sale, but Seline offers to pay any amount for them. The man throws his head back with a sudden, loud ha-ha-ha sounding laughter. The man lets out a sudden, relieved pew sounding and asks if she truly understands the cost of the item. A sudden, soft, gently sounding accompanies the man as he leans in very close to Seline. The green-haired man stares at her and says he finally understands the situation. The man declares that his question has finally been answered. Seline watches the man with a suspicious and confused look. A sudden, quick whoosh sounding marks the man turning around to ask if she lives in the area. Seline explains that she is currently a student at the academy located in the capital. A close-up highlights the green-haired man's partially hidden, serious face. The man decides to sell her the cufflinks at a special price because the original owner never showed up. The ruby cufflinks sparkle brilliantly against their white display padding. Narrative text emphasizes that the jewelry is incredibly expensive. A sudden ringing ding-dong sounding follows as Seline produces a small pile of silver coins. The man reacts to the payment with a sudden, amused, poofed sounding as he begins to laugh again. The man mocks her for boasting about paying any price and then offering such a small amount of money. Seline offers to fetch more money, but the man says he will take what she has and cover the rest himself. The green-haired man takes a drink from a small leather pouch. The man warns Seline that there is no turning back from this point. Seline asks for clarification while the man asks if she wants the item packed up. Seline reflects on the total lack of communication between her and the strange man. Seline looks down at the small, dark jewelry box in her hands with a dazed expression. The man tells her to take care and write neatly as Seline thanks him for the purchase. A sudden, sharp click sounding marks the door closing as Seline exits the shop. The hooded man stands alone in the shadows with a small, knowing smile. Narrative text explains that the flower bloomed enough to finally be touched by human hands. A dark blue cloak flutters as someone moves quickly through the shadows. The green-haired man, Raven, tells himself that he should not be forgiven. Narrative text suggests that he might have been happier if he had never discovered the trumps. Seline walks down the street while still wondering about the strange man's true identity. Seline stops and looks back with the sudden, curious glimpses sounding at the building she just left. Seline is stunned to see that the appearance of the shop has completely changed. Seline stares ahead with a blank expression as a sudden, quiet sigh sounding escapes her. Seline resolves to quickly find a gift for Bella and return before the wait becomes too long. The scene shifts to the quiet, grand corridors of a sunlit mansion. Seline returns holding a small gift box as Damian asks if she has arrived back. Seline stands before Damian, ready to share the item she brought from her trip. Seline presents a ribbon-wrapped gift from the children at Marianne, asking Damian to accept it. Seline shows Damian a box containing socks and charcoal pieces meant for both of them. Seline mentions that Mia and her aunt prepared tea for them to enjoy together later in the kitchen. Damian questions her habit of wearing socks to sleep, and Seline explains it was necessary for the cold winters. Damian looks at Seline with a soft, affectionate expression as she finishes her explanation. Seline presents a second, more ornate jewelry box with a sudden, soft rustling sounding. Seline looks at Damian with a bright, expectant smile as she offers him her personal gift. Seline admits she chose the item specifically for him, though she remains unsure of his reaction. Seline suggests moving to a room to see the gift, but Damian insists on opening it immediately. Seline frantically pushes Damian toward a different spot to look at the gift as a sudden, flustered sounding occurs. Damian laughs heartily at Celine's reaction, finding the situation quite amusing. A sudden, sharp click sounding marks the moment the ornate box is finally opened. Damian gazes down at the jewelry in shock, questioning if Seline truly purchased such an item. A brilliant ruby cufflink surrounded by diamonds sparkles intensely under the light. Damian stares at the jewelry box and declares that the gift is officially his to keep. Damian reflects on the weight of the gift and wonders if he can truly handle the responsibility. Damian looks at Seline with a confident and knowing smile. The scene transitions to the academy as narrative text celebrates the accomplishments of a proud graduate. The Grand Library stands as a testament to the time spent studying and the pledges made for the future. Damian Willow is announced as the valedictorian, while Seline watches the ceremony with a proud smile. Chibi Seline remembers Damian struggling to open a simple jar of jam in the past. Chibi Seline recalls Damian's total confusion during their previous sword practice sessions. Seline wonders if Damian was truly a hardworking genius, while she glows with a sudden, proud sounding. Seline gazes at Damian from afar, feeling a pang of sadness that they will see each other less after graduation. Damian turns with a sudden, radiant sounding as he offers Seline a beautiful, wide smile. A close-up highlights the intricate details and golden tassels of Celine's formal academy uniform. The group sits at a lavish dinner table while reflecting on the lack of interesting events that day. Seline looks up with a surprised and slightly wide-eyed expression during the dinner conversation. The older woman discusses traditional rings during the meal while Damian and Seline listen intently. The white-haired woman laughs while recalling the moment she and the Duke became engaged. A butler enters the dining room to announce that the Duke has arrived at the mansion. Seline stands up from the table in a sudden, startled state of shock. The older woman calmly reassures Seline and tells her to take her time getting ready. Damian suggests they stay and enjoy the delicious desserts before rushing off to meet the Duke. Seline reacts with a sudden realization sounding as she notices something important. Seline points at the ruby button on Damian's sleeve and asks if he truly likes wearing it. Damian smiles and tells Seline he likes it so much he might never wear any other accessory. Seline looks at him with a shocked expression and insists that he cannot only wear one button. Chibi Bella explains that some jewelry suits everything, while Seline ponders the logic behind it. Damian asks Seline about her own jewelry preferences as she admits she doesn't have a specific favorite. Chibi, Seline, and Damian consider the idea of a sword being used as a fashionable accessory. Seline insists that a sword is the best possible accessory to pair with a swordsman's uniform.
Damian looks at Seline and suggests that a different type of accessory might be more suitable.
Damian smiles softly while suggesting that something the size of a ring would be a perfect gift. Seline raises her hand and excitedly declares her dream of wearing a wedding ring one day. Chibi Seline remembers her father wearing a ring while practicing with a wooden sword. Seline reflects on her desire to wear a wedding ring during a grand dinner. Damian's gaze softens as a sudden smiling sounding marks the change in his expression.
Damian produces a small, dark jewelry box while addressing Seline.
Damian catches Celine's attention to begin a more serious conversation. Damian explains that he has been carefully considering Celine's earlier words. Damian stands up and asks Seline if she would be willing to accept the ring. Seline reacts with a look of pure shock and disbelief at the offer.
Damian gazes at Seline with a gentle and warm smile.
The open box reveals a pair of ornate ruby cufflinks sparkling intensely against blue velvet. Damian requests that Seline take charge of keeping the cufflinks for him.
Seline recalls her intention to gift a ring to her future spouse upon graduation.
Narrative text notes Celine's self-admitted inability to properly care for personal belongings.
Chibi Damian explains his habit of simply placing all received items into underground storage.
Damian hands the box over to Seline while expressing his gratitude. Seline transitions the conversation as she prepares to ask another question. Seline questions Damian about the timing of his own marriage. Damian admits he hasn't even received a confession from anyone yet.
Damian laughs at the idea of being seen as incompetent if Seline marries first.
Damian offers Seline a calm and knowing smile. Seline looks at him with a serious and slightly stunned expression. Damian gives a short, affirmative response to her query. Seline vows to ignore any romantic advances until Damian finds a fiancé. Seline resolves to tell others that she currently has no intention of marrying. A sudden touch sounding occurs as Damian reaches out to the box. Seline looks at Damian with a bright and happy smile. Seline encourages Damian to look for his own destined person. Damian looks at her and agrees with her sentiment. Damian suggests that his destined person might be unexpectedly close to him. Night settles over the grand and illuminated towers of the Red Brittle Mansion. Seline asks if the meal was enjoyable during their social gathering.
The family and guests gather in the lavish drawing room to socialize together.
Seline asks about the facial wound on Baron Mars as she approaches with a sudden, calm sounding. Narrative text reveals that someone suggested the Baron should have rested instead of visiting. Damian stands ready as the Baron insists on personally delivering a gift to him. Baron Mars identifies the gift as a rare flower known as a camellia. Baron Mars describes how he discovered the rare plant while climbing a mountain. Chibi Seline looks at the new plant with a sense of wonder and curiosity. Damian gazes down at the flower with a thoughtful and calm expression. Damian thanks Baron Mars and promises to take excellent care of the flower.
A sudden lift sounding accompanies Damian as he picks up the potted camellia.
Seline asks for permission to visit Damian's room to see the plant later.
Chibi characters debate the appropriateness of friends visiting each other's private rooms.
Damian smiles and assures Seline that she has never caused him any trouble.
The Duchess tells the young pair to go rest early as it is getting late.
The Duchess reminds Damian he is still her child while the adults stay behind to talk. Seline and Damian walk through the grand hallway, reflecting on being treated like children.
Seline looks down at her boot and mentions the need to be more realistic about her life.
Seline reflects on moving forward alone now that her time at the academy is ending. Seline realizes that Damian's future responsibilities as a duke will make him much busier. Damian mentions that Russell has started working in the House of Commons, and Seline notes that Count Ryder is the current leader there. A sudden, quiet stop sounding occurs as a black-shod foot halts on the patterned floor. The pair walks together down a grand, sunlit hallway lined with elegant benches and floral arrangements. Damian bids Seline a good night, and she warmly wishes for him to sleep well too. Narrative text offers final congratulations on a successful graduation. The scene shifts to a bright, clear sky 2 weeks after the Academy's opening day. A vibrant camellia plant with bright red flowers sits tucked away in a dark pot. Seline reacts with a sudden realization sounding as she checks the time and worries about being late. Seline waves a bright farewell to Damian while running off toward her next destination. Damian offers a short, gentle laugh, sounding well promising to see Seline again soon. The grand, multi-tiered towers of the Academy stand tall against a brilliant blue sky. Seline looks ahead with a focused expression while wearing her formal white and gold Academy uniform. A close-up highlights Celine's sharp green eyes as she concentrates on her surroundings. Chibi Seline looks around with a sudden, searching sounding as if she is hunting for something. Seline observes the empty corridors and notes that there is currently no one else around. Seline pauses in her tracks as the shadowy silhouettes of other students pass through the hallway. Seline gazes up at a towering clock tower and wonders if something is wrong. Seline asks her companions if they feel a gaze from above, but they assure her that no one is there. Seline mentions that the teaching assistant's room is located in that tower and complains that her feet are already hurting. Seline notes that class will start soon and urges the group to hurry while still wondering whose gaze she felt. Sunlight glints off the high, arched windows of the Grand Stone Academy building. A caption marks the passage of time as classes finally come to an end for the day. A close-up focuses on the golden tassels and intricate embroidery of a formal uniform. Seline stands alert among blooming flowers, looking as if she has just been surprised. Seline adopts a skeptical expression while questioning if anyone suspicious has entered the area. Seline resolves to reach the top floor with her companion before suddenly asking who is standing there. Seline spins around with a sudden, startled swoosh sounding as her eyes go wide with shock. Seline is stunned to see Damian standing behind her, dressed in a formal, dark navy uniform. Damian looks at Seline with a calm, steady gaze, appearing completely at home in his new attire. Seline stands in disbelief and questions why Damian is present at the academy. A sudden realization sounding marks the moment Seline stops to process the situation. Seline points at Damian's shirt and asks for an explanation with a look of pure confusion. Narrative text reveals that Damian has decided to serve as a teaching assistant at the academy for the next 3 years. Damian offers a short, happy grin sounding while looking at Seline with a bright expression. Golden buttons on a navy uniform sparkle under the light, highlighting the prestige of the position. Chibi Seline is left speechless and flabbergasted by the unexpected news. Seline asks for the location of Damian's room, and he reveals that it is at the very top of the tower. Damian explains that the high floor is perfect for his training, much to Celine's continued surprise. An attendant approaches and informs Damian that he has been waiting to receive him. The attendant bows deeply and requests that Damian follow him to check on the new office. Damian and the attendant begin the long climb up a narrow, winding stone staircase. The attendant starts to lose his breath and leans forward as the steep climb continues. The attendant gasps for air while leaning against the wall, clearly exhausted by the many stairs. They finally reach the top, and the attendant shivers from the sheer physical effort of the journey. A sudden, sparkling sounding occurs as the attendant presents an ornate gold key passed down from the academy's founding. Damian asks about a spare, but the attendant insists that the door will only open for this specific, unique key. A sudden, sparkling sounding fills the air as Damian enters a lavishly decorated room. Damian looks around the well-preserved room and notes that it is in excellent condition for being unused for so long. The attendant mentions the principal's approval and asks one last time if such a high floor is truly acceptable. Damian assures the man that the room is absolutely perfect and expresses his great satisfaction with the arrangement. A companion praises Damian's efforts as they stand together in the newly assigned office. Damian walks across the expansive, empty room while reflecting on his new environment. Damian runs a finger along the desk and is pleased to find it is completely free of dust. Damian sits in his chair with a sudden plop sounding and notes the high quality of the items in the room. Damian examines a book on the desk and wonders who previously occupied the office. Damian gazes at the book with a quiet and pensive expression while resting his chin on his hand. A close-up focuses on a label mentioning a connection to a crow and a camellia. Damian looks at the flower and recognizes it as the camellia Baron Mars gifted him. Damian looks ahead with a steady gaze, noting he has been considering this for quite some time. An ornate gold key with a large red gem sits atop the patterned surface of the desk. A sudden, bright sounding occurs as the key is lifted, highlighting its intricate and jewel-encrusted design. Narrative text expresses disbelief that the item is the same kind as the one from Chaldea. A close-up highlights a sharp green eye narrowed in deep concentration. Narrative text questions if the strange similarity is merely a coincidence. Damian sets an item down with a sudden click sounding and suggests adding a clock to the room. Damian looks toward the grand windows at the bright and clear sky beyond. Damian turns with a calm and satisfied smile appearing on his face. The tall, white stone towers of the academy stand prominently against the blue sky. Celine's friends question her about Damian's true motives while they picnic on the grass together. Chibi Seline reacts with a sudden, panting sounding as a friend mentions Damian's busy life as a duke. A tiered tray of cake sets on the picnic blanket as a friend describes typical assistant roles at the academy. Seline listens as a friend wonders why a titled heir would stay at the academy for 3 years. Celine's green eyes widen as she processes the group's inquisitive questions. Seline suddenly declares that she has understood the true reason behind Damian's unexpected choice. Seline laughs and reassures her friends that Damian is simply a very hardworking person. Celine's expression becomes more determined as she looks away from the socializing group. Narrative text asks if the focus of everyone's attention has now shifted entirely to Damian. A close-up captures Celine's hand clutching the gold cord of her formal academy uniform. The intricate clock tower of the academy is illuminated by the light of the bright sun. A large, red, egg-shaped object glows faintly within the surrounding darkness. Narrative text notes that several days have passed since the pair's initial meeting. Chibi Seline looks worried as she wonders if she is simply being overly sensitive about the situation. A friend asks Seline if she is still feeling the mysterious and unsettling gaze she mentioned before. The blonde student looks at Seline with a skeptical and questioning gaze. Seline and her friend walk through the hallway while the friend asks if Damian is watching her all day. Seline offers a warm smile while recalling a specific part of her earlier conversation with Damian.
Seline reflects on Damian's busy schedule and his mention of visiting the parliament today.
Seline's eyes widen in a moment of sudden and startling realization about her circumstances. Seline suddenly spins around and begins to run with a sudden rushing sounding. Seline's companion asks about lunch while Seline looks up at the tower with a focused gaze.
The grand clock tower of the academy stands tall against a brilliant and clear blue sky. Rapid movements occur on the stone steps as someone hurries up the long, winding staircase.
Seline stops on the stairs and notes the difficulty of climbing to the 30th floor. Seline pauses outside the door, sensing a presence and wondering if Damian is inside. Seline feels a strange sensation, as if the person within the room is calling out to her.
Seline reaches for the door handle with a sudden rustle sounding while apologizing for her intrusion.
Seline is shocked to find that the office door is securely locked from the inside. Seline reflects on the unique key and realizes she must find another way to gain entry.
Seline fumbles in her pocket with a sudden fumbling sounding and makes a surprise discovery.
Seline's eyes widen with pure shock as she questions the nature of the item she has just found. Seline holds the ornate gold key with a large red gem in her palm.
Narrative text expresses Seline's confusion over when the object appeared.
Seline looks ahead with a shocked and questioning expression. The key is inserted into the lock with a sudden click sounding. Seline reacts to a sudden rattle sounding coming from the heavy doors. Seline shouts in surprise while jumping back as the large doors move on their own. Seline's hand is taken by a sudden trembling sounding while she questions what just happened. The doors open wide with a sudden squeak sounding as Seline stands prepared. A heavy black boot steps onto the floor with a sudden thump sounding. Seline screams as she is overwhelmed by a sudden ooh sounding vibration from the room beyond. A sudden silence sounding follows as Seline crouches on the floor with her head covered. Seline looks up with wide emerald eyes in a moment of pure shock. The opening reveals a secret passage behind a bookshelf leading to a dark stone staircase. Winding stone steps lead deeper into the shadows of the hidden area. Seline hesitates and wonders if she should retreat to find assistance.
Seline's expression becomes serious as she resolves to investigate the mystery herself.
Seline steps forward into the room with a sudden step sounding.
Seline enters the dark threshold of the hidden library passage.
Seline notes that the destination appears much higher than she had first believed. Seline turns her head with a sudden whoosh sounding as if sensing a presence. Seline gasps in surprise as she reaches the end of the secret path. A large red egg sits atop a pedestal in the center of a glowing magical circle.
A voice calls out to Damian as he prepares to depart in his carriage.
Miss Arsum approaches with a sudden pant sounding while appearing deeply distressed.
Damian stops to ask if something is wrong while looking at the blonde student.
Damian listens intently with a look of growing concern in his blue eyes. Ms. Arsum explains that Seline has been missing for hours after leaving at lunchtime. Miss Arsum suggests that Seline might have been kidnapped after her recent claims of being watched. Damian reflects on Seline's mention of a gaze coming from the top of the tower. Damian orders a search near the tower and tells Miss Arsum to remain calm. Damian turns and begins to run toward the academy building. Damian expresses disbelief at the academy's security while rushing toward the tower steps. Damian's gaze hardens with intense anger as he considers the danger Seline is in. Damian reaches the top floor and finds the door opening with a sudden squeak sounding. Narrative text notes Damian's surprise that the door was left completely unlocked. The door is thrown wide with a sudden fling open sounding as Damian enters. Damian stands in the center of the office where papers are scattered across a mat. Damian looks around the empty room with a stunned and worried expression. Damian spins around with a sudden turn sounding while frantically wondering where she could be. Damian's attention is caught by a sudden gasp sounding as he sees the shelf moved aside.
Damian questions the existence of the hidden stairs revealed behind the bookcase. Damian looks at the secret passage with a sense of urgent confusion.
Damian descends the dark stone stairs as quickly as he can. Damian finds the red-haired girl lying unconscious on the cold stone floor. Damian screams Seline's name in a moment of absolute panic. Damian kneels down and pulls Seline into a protective embrace. Seline slowly opens her eyes and weakly calls out Damian's name. Damian expresses relief that she is awake and asks for an explanation for the situation. The large egg pulses with a sudden whir sounding as it glows with a dark red light. Seline gazes at the pedestal and identifies the strange object as an egg. Seline feels that the situation is illogical. Seline thinks the egg looks very only. Light glows from the mysterious red object. Seline asks the egg if it was the one observing her this entire time. Seline's finger brushes the shell with a sudden touch sounding.
The magical circle hums with a sudden whir sounding.
Seline screams in shock as bright beams of light erupt from the floor. A massive aura erupts with a sudden whoosh sending. Damian asks for confirmation that she lost consciousness immediately after making physical contact with the mysterious object. Seline reassures Damian that she is feeling much better and manages to stand up. Seline's balance suddenly falters with a sudden stagger sounding as she tries to mock. Seline gasps in pain while clutching her head. Damian tells her not to force herself and suggests that she sit down to rest. Seline leans against Damian within the tower.
Seline pauses to recover from her pain.
Seline notes with surprise that her sudden headache has vanished completely. Seline turns her head with a sudden glance sounding.
Seline moves back with a sudden approach sounding. Damian warns her to keep her distance because they still do not know what the object is. Seline addresses Damian while eyeing the egg. Seline looks at the egg with determination.
Seline declares that they absolutely cannot leave the mysterious item behind in the tower. Seline explains that she felt a strange and direct connection forming when she touched the egg. Seline suggests that this link was likely the cause of her sudden and intense headache. Damian stares at the ground quite pensively. Damian insists that she is still a patient and tells her to focus on leaving while he carries it. Damian explains that her body hasn't recovered and she might drop the egg on the stairs, so she agrees to let him carry it.
The red egg pulses with a rhythmic and sudden whir X2 sounding.
Oppressive shadows fill the tower's stone passage. Damian reacts to the pulsing egg with a sudden, startled sounding.
Damian carefully carries the egg as it emits a constant whir sounding.
Jerome Fisher's glasses catch a glint sounding. Jerome links the ancient library documents to the mysterious connection Damian described. Seline's intense pain is briefly recalled. The egg sits silently on its pedestal. Damian asks the librarian if they are still unable to identify the specific species of the monster.
An open book displays dense ancient writing.
Damian asks if treating the egg will help her condition, but Jerome explains that such an outcome is currently impossible to predict. Damian and Jerome look intensely serious. Narrative text explains that the connection is a monster's instinctive imprinting bond with its parent. Jerome advises that they should maintain the status quo for now, causing Damian to question the meaning behind his vague suggestion. Damian explains that some monster species carry a terrible curse that activates if anyone harms their offspring. Jerome confirms that dragons are a well-known example of this behavior and warns that Lady Mars could be in significant danger. Narrative text highlights the unbelievable nature of the connection. Damian dismisses the librarian and asks for some privacy. The heavy door is shut with a sudden, close sounding. Damian thinks that the talk of connections and monsters is completely absurd.
Damian looks pensive and deeply troubled.
Damian sits alone among his books. Narrative text states that Seline was the specific trigger that caused the egg to appear. Close-up of the mysterious red egg. A new life begins with the egg. Seline makes a cute, sulking expression. Seline reassures her companion during a meal that there is no need to worry. The egg occupies a seat at dinner.
A detailed gaze reveals emerald eyes.
Seline finishes an impressively large meal. Jerome explains the egg's parasitic nutrient consumption. Seline stands up from her seat. Seline carries the heavy egg through halls. Official efforts are made to resolve the matter. Rumors of the egg reach high society. Seline stands before the Grand Academy Tower. A friend calls out to Seline and asks what she is holding. Seline encourages her hesitant friends to approach, insisting the egg is not dangerous. Seline is startled by a sudden scream sounding as the mysterious egg vibrates. Seline senses the egg's sudden happiness while her friends watch in confusion. Seline smiles and says the egg likes it more if you touch it. The blonde-haired girl watches with weary goat. Seline moves the egg with a sudden swish sounding while offering it to her friends. A hand tentatively brushes the red shell. Claire reacts with a surprised, blushing expression. The group slowly accepts their new companion. A tiny dress for the egg is revealed with a sudden ta-da sounding. Seline explains that Bella sent the basket from the countryside as the girls walk.
Bella's letter advises that the egg must be kept warm at all times.
Seline explains that the heavy egg feels light if treated as muscle training. Seline worries the egg might break while she keeps it close during training. Seline looks ahead with a thoughtful gaze. A warm greeting asks Seline how she has been lately over a floral background. A handsome blonde man greets them tearfully. Sir Russell explains he is delivering documents for the Noble Institute meeting at the Academy. Russell comments on the sudden declaration of a teaching assistant role at the tower.
A close detail of the gentleman's attire.
Sir Russell introduces himself to the girls as a friend of Farine. Sir Russell greets them and notes he heard they are very close to Seline. Sir Russell requests that the ladies continue to treat Seline well as a sister. Sir Russell offers a pleasant farewell. Seline waves and tells Sir Russell to take care. The friends ask Seline for the identity of the man who just left. Claire notes Russell is a friend of Duke Willow and wonders if the Duke has friends. A warm memory shows 3 childhood friends fishing on a pier. Damian and Russell frequently visited Marianne together during every holiday. The trio rests peacefully under the sun. Seline is taken by a sudden, sounding while wondering if Russell is bullying Damian. The girls question if Sir Russell looked angry despite the duo being close friends. Claire is caught by a sudden, dazed sounding as she stares blankly into the distance. A focus on the details of her uniform. Seline asks Claire what is wrong, but Claire dismisses her concern. The brown-haired friend begins asking another question. Claire asks if the person mentioned is similar to the young Earl.
An unknown figure watches from the shadows as the girls request a future introduction. A man with vibrant green hair stands solemnly under the bright sky. The mysterious hooded man gazes forward with a calm and distant expression.
Seline smiles with genuine warmth and happiness.
The hooded man remains seated on the floor in quiet contemplation.
A close focus on the man's gloved hand resting against the stone.
The green-haired man looks up with a look of silent determination. The man decides he must keep a watchful eye on the situation a while longer. 1 year passes and Damian asks if Seline has finished her packing.
Seline confirms she is ready from behind her bedroom door.
Damian waits patiently with a steady and serious gaze. Damian questions the weight of the bag, and Seline confirms it is the only one.
Damian hoists the massive backpack with a sudden grab sounding.
Seline is stunned as Damian effortlessly asks if there is anything else to carry.
Seline says there isn't anything left, and Damian leads the way out.
The pair walks through the grand hallway as Seline carries the red egg. Seline watches Damian and wonders when he became so remarkably strong.
Seline recalls his past struggles with small tasks and scholarly anger.
Damian tells her to rely on him and not to push herself too high. Seline is caught by a sudden sounding while doubting his true identity. Seline reflects on her old wishes for him and the fear of their eventual parting.
Seline's expression softens with a hint of melancholy as her thoughts wander.
Seline is taken by a sudden, startled sounding as she snaps back to reality.
Seline gives an energetic confirmation as they reach their destination. The sun shines brilliantly through the drifting white clouds.
Narrative text introduces the campsite and tells everyone to unload their gear.
The group arrives at the campsite and drops their bags with a sudden place sounding. Seline looks over the camp area with an excited and happy smile.
Narrative text describes the plans for their 2-day outdoor adventure.
Seline gazes at the scenery with peaceful and bright green eyes.
Seline reflects on how her bond with the egg restricted her summer vacation plans.
Someone announces the completion of the shelter with a sudden ta-da sounding.
A simple brown tent is pitched firmly on the grassy field. Seline credits her efficiency to the many lessons she learned at night school.
Seline suggests they head into the woods to find firewood.
Damian watches Seline's every move with a sharp and protective eye. A close detail of the golden embroidery on Damian's dark color.
The group acknowledges the plan and begins to move toward the trees.
The scene shifts to the quiet and lush greenery of the surrounding forest.
Seline looks away with a slight and pensive frown. Damian's gaze softens with concern as he watches her.
Sunlight filters through the dense canopy of the tall trees.
The group works together to pile the collected branches on the ground. Claire asks if more wood is needed, but Seline suggests sharing their surplus. Seline leads her friends further into the wilderness to explore. Seline pauses as she spots something unexpected through the bushes. Seline's eyes widen with a look of pure amazement.
A sparkling blue stream flows peacefully through the forest clearing.
Seline identifies the water source and notes its usefulness for the group. Seline notices mushrooms at a tree.
Seline prepares to cross the stream as she hears a sudden rhythmic pull, X2, sounding, while her friends worry about getting their shoes wet.
Hands pull up the trouser hem. Seline offers a bright smile and tells her companions to stay back while she gathers the mushrooms. Seline moves through the shallow water with a sudden rhythmic wade X2 sounding. Seline carries the lace-trimmed basket.
A hand brushes the mushroom cap.
Seline lets out a sudden happy hee-hee sounding while imagining the variety these will add to their dinner. Seline scans the area with a sudden, curious look, sounding while searching for a place to put her harvest.
The red eggshell blessens.
Seline lifts the heavy egg from its basket with a sudden, straining hup sounding.
Seline sets the heavy egg down. The egg escapes its resting place and moves with a sudden, continuous roll, sounding.
Seline looks up with a smile. Seline reaches for the egg and remarks that they can finally return to the camp.
A look of horror strikes Seline. The egg moves toward the edge with a sudden, rapid roll.
Seline is frozen in shock as a sudden, heavy splash sounding echoes when the egg hits the water.
Seline dives into the cold stream.
A blurry figure approaches in darkness.
Seline wakes with a sudden, gasping, startled sounding while snapping her eyes open. Damian watches with an intense gaze.
Seline moves with a sudden, quick sit-up sounding while questioning why Damian is there.
Seline looks down with deep guilt. Damian scolds Seline for her reckless behavior and points out that her actions nearly cost her life. Damian reassures Seline that the egg is safe because he brought it back himself.
Damian sternly announces that he is removing her from her position as a night guardian.
Damian turns away with a sudden, soft, gently sounding as he questions her ability to protect others when she cannot protect herself.
Damian orders Seline to climb onto his back so he can carry her. Seline tries to refuse his help, but Damian tells her not to be stubborn because he is furious. Damian carries Seline through the trolley. Seline's eyes fill with silent regret. Damian looks ahead with grim focus. Seline bows her head and offers a quiet, sincere apology to Damian. Damian tells Seline to rest while her companions support her with concerned expressions.
Damian's boots trudge through the dirt.
Damian walks away from the cope. Narrative text reflects on the consequences if the mysterious connection had truly manifested.
Damian stares forward with icy resolve. Stars twinkle in the sunset sky. Seline lies awake in the dark with a sudden, slow blink sounding.
Seline rises from her bed with a sudden, tired sit-up sounding.
Seline walks toward her friends and asks if they require any assistance with the chores.
Seline decides she should do something helpful now that she has regained her strength.
A single mushroom sits on display.
Seline looks down in quiet pot.
Seline's expression is full of sorrow.
Claire asks if she is working for the Duke as Seline reacts with a sudden, flustered X2 sounding.
Damian looks back in total shock.
Narrative text explains that Damian disregarded his own safety and jumped into the water to save her.
Damian holds the red egg while looking down with a somber expression.
Seline reacts with surprise when asked if that is the case.
Narrative text reflects on Seline's shock at seeing Damian's rare and intense anger despite his usually kind demeanor. A friend observes Seline's flustered state and notes how much Damian clearly treasures her. The friends express playful jealousy over the attention Seline receives.
Seline is taken by a sudden gasping sound as she reacts to their teasing.
The girls suggest that being cared for by someone as wonderful as Damian is a dream, causing Seline to blush.
Seline insists that Damian is simply a gentle person who would help anyone, while the friends remain skeptical about the young Duke's motives.
Seline stares ahead with a shocked and overwhelmed expression.
A voice calls out for Claire against the backdrop of a darkening night sky. The friends leave to wash dishes while reminding Seline to guard the egg carefully inside the tent.
The campsite remains quiet as a small fire burns with a sudden, rhythmic burn sounding. Seline considers cleaning up to stay busy until someone offers their assistance.
Damian approaches with a warm smile, taking Seline by surprise.
Seline moves with a sudden, rhythmic, stiff X2 sounding while insisting she can handle the chores alone. Damian asks if she is angry, prompting a flustered denial from Seline. Damian follows Seline and apologizes for his earlier outburst, admitting his words were uncalled for. Seline tries to brush it off, but Damian remains firm that his anger today was misplaced.
The two bicker over who was more at fault for the day's events.
Damian proposes a truce where Seline avoids danger and he promises not to lose his temper. Damian continues to take the blame as Seline wonders if the distinction truly matters. Damian's attention is taken by a sudden, soft chuckle sounding as he tries to put Seline at ease. Seline turns around with a sudden, surprised puff sounding.
Damian gazes at Seline with a quiet and intense look. Damian offers a bright smile that leaves Seline visibly blushing.
Seline is taken by a sudden, startled sounding as she hears her friends returning.
Seline rushes back to her tent to avoid further scolding, bidding Damian a quick goodnight.
Claire catches Seline and warns her against running in her current state.
Damian watches Seline leave with a pensive expression. Narrative text reflects on a strange reaction, wondering if it was merely a misunderstanding.
Stars begin to fill the deep blue night sky.
The campsite settles into the stillness of the night. Inside the tent, the friends urge Seline to share her thoughts on a worrying topic. Seline hesitates as she tries to find the right words. A friend questions Seline about her ideal role model, listing several of her own. Seline admits she has never really considered who her ideal model might be.
The brown-haired friend suggests that Seline probably admires someone with superior sword skills.
Another friend agrees, noting Celine's respect for her father, while Seline shakes her head in disagreement. Seline clarifies that her ideal partner doesn't necessarily need to be a better swordsman than her.
The girls press Seline to describe the kind of person she actually likes.
Seline explains her interest in hardworking individuals and her desire to find someone who complements her shortcomings.
Claire reflects on Celine's answer and admits she also appreciates hardworking people. The group shifts the conversation toward personality traits like thoughtfulness.
The friends watch Seline with looks of intense suspicion and curiosity. Seline reacts with shock when a friend points out that her description perfectly matches Damian. Seline moves with a sudden, rhythmic, frantic, and hesitate sounding, while desperately claiming Damian is only her future master. Seline doubts that Damian truly treats her with the kindness and respect her friends suggest. A friend offers to introduce Seline to a potential gentleman caller. The silhouettes of a potential suitor named Louis are discussed as someone who liked Seline instantly. The friend warmly recommends her brother, insisting he is a good man who fits all of Celine's criteria. Seline reacts to the suggestion with a look of surprise. Claire asks Seline if the Duke is her only close companion. Claire suggests that Seline should meet other people before it is too late. Claire reassures Seline while suggesting she simply enjoy a cup of tea with others. The group is urged to sleep as the professor approaches with a sudden rustle sounding. Seline lies awake in the quiet darkness of the tent. Celine's eyes remain open as she stares into the shadows. A friend complains that the sand will not come out of her hair. Narrative text reflects on the need for a thorough shower and rough hands. The brown-haired friend plans to sleep all day with a sudden grab sound in. Claire asks Seline about the conversation they had the previous day. Seline is taken by a sudden and startled expression. A small friend suggests that they continue their discussion in more detail later. Seline looks away with a pensive and uncertain expression. Narrative text explains Celine's decision to try something new for a clear mind.
The group of friends walks together under a bright and clear sky. Narrative text notes Celine's realization about her growing closeness to Damian. Celine remembers Damian's gentle smile during a past encounter.
Celine looks ahead with a newfound sense of resolve.
Damian considers the year remaining until Celine graduates from the academy. A blonde man sighs while bringing up the subject of Lewis Gardner. The blonde man strikes the desk with a sudden smack sounding while criticizing Lewis's nerve. Damian scoffs at the idea of a date with a sudden scotch sounding. Damian's hand moves a paper across the desk with a sudden slide sounding. Damian reads a report about a popular singer known as the Rose Expert. The blonde man explains the fame of the singer and the rumors surrounding her.
Damian dismisses the singer while the blonde man playfully teases him.
The blonde man describes the singer's beauty and her rumored noble lineage. The blonde man notes the singer's picky nature and questions her family background. The blonde man offers a bright smile as Damian remains deep in thought. Narrative text explains the singer's commoner background and her fear of exposure. Damian stares forward while pondering the price required to meet her. Damian rises from his chair with a sudden stand sounding as he prepares to leave. Damian announces his destination as the blonde man watches with a confused expression. Damian turns away with a subtle and knowing smirk. Narrative text describes a chance meeting over rose tea between Louis and the singer. Damian maintains an intense and focused gaze. Narrative text notes how quickly the suggestion of a walk was made. Damian mumbles about easily swayed hearts with a sudden mumble sounding. Celine is struck by a moment of utter disbelief. Damian addresses a misunderstanding while Celine listens with her head bowed. Damian looks at Celine and announces that it is time for them to go. Damian gently lifts Celine's chin with a sudden caress sounding while expressing concern. Celine and Damian question each other's unexpected presence in the busy neighborhood. Damian notes that Celine is alone and beautifully dressed despite her previous claims. Celine becomes visibly flustered with a sudden embarrassed sounding. Celine offers a nervous explanation with a sudden ha-ha sounding while mentioning a missed meeting. Celine asks Damian about the nature of his own morning appointments. Damian smiles at Celine and asks if she truly wishes to know the answer. Celine is taken by a sudden ponder X2 sounding as she considers his words. Damian offers a bright smile while mentioning he had several people to meet earlier. The white-haired man notes the surprise of his night keeping secrets and decides he will also need to keep secrets in the future. Celine desperately claims she did not intend for things to happen the way they did. Damian's expression is taken by a sudden, pensive sulk sounding as he reflects on how Celine kept a secret from him. Celine's attention is taken by a sudden and awkward sounding as she admits she was merely curious about something. Celine reacts with a sudden and intense blush sounding while hiding her face in her hands. Damian asks Celine what she wants to know and questions if he should provide an answer. Celine's voice is joined by a sudden rhythmic nervous X2 sounding as she admits her curiosity about dating. Damian suggests that gaining experience once might be beneficial, while Celine inwardly panics about admitting her true feelings for him. Celine responds with a look of sudden surprise. Damian gazes ahead with a warm and gentle smile. Damian acknowledges his own gender and suggests that Celine should try dating him to see how it feels. Celine stares back with an expression of complete and utter confusion. Damian defines their nicely dressed encounter on a beautiful day as a date, causing Celine to react with a sudden, panicked, oh God sounding. Damian moves with a sudden and direct point sounding while indicating the bright sky above. The two stand together in the street as Damian reflects on their fine attire.
Celine looks ahead with an expression of total shock.
Damian moves with a sudden, quick lean sounding and a startled sounding from Celine as he asks if she dislikes his outfit. A close-up reveals the intricate details of the blue gemstone brooch on Damian's collar. The decision is made to head out as the scenery shifts toward a bustling street. Damian announces their arrival at the clothing store while Celine watches in silence. Damian points out that Celine failed to compliment his outfit, leading to a flustered denial from her. Damian offers his hand and playfully complains about waiting too long for her to take it. Celine's attention is taken by a sudden, frustrated sounding as she hesitates to take his hand. Celine's hand moves with a sudden, firm hold sounding as she finally accepts Damian's arm. The two continue their playful bickering about the necessity of changing Damian's clothes. A shopkeeper offers a warm welcome as the pair enters the luxurious establishment. A voice from within the store recognizes Damian as the young Duke Willow. Celine reacts with a sudden and worried, oh dear, sounding as the shopkeeper notes Damian's upcoming tailoring plans. The shopkeeper compliments Damian's current look, but Damian offers a subtle smirk while Celine attempts to explain herself. Celine's eyes are fixed on Damian with a sudden, intense staring sounding. Celine loudly declares her dissatisfaction with the current options. Celine mutters to herself about her lack of satisfaction while a dark, shadowy figure looms behind her. Celine decides that they should begin their shopping session by choosing a new cravat. The shopkeeper prepares to show the collection of cravats kept in the display cases. Damian's hands move with a sudden, sharp crack knuckle sounding while the shopkeeper agrees to assist them. Celine's voice is joined by a sudden, soft whispering sounding as she warns Damian about the high prices in the shop.
Seline reacts to the high cost of the items with a sudden and audible gulp sounding. Damian considers the pricing and suggests that the cost might be sufficient for a single high-quality piece.
The shopkeeper presents the fabric collection and explains the difference in price between the various tiers.
Damian asks Seline to select something she likes for him, leaving the shopkeeper surprised by the Duke's sudden concern for prices.
Seline is left completely overwhelmed by the choices as narrative text explains that Damian usually has others pick his clothes.
A shimmering piece of purple fabric catches the light inside the display.
Seline looks ahead with an expression of newfound and intense resolve.
Seline asks Damian if his usual payment method has changed for this visit.
Damian's voice is joined by a sudden, soft snickers softly sounding as he jokes about sticking to his usual payment habits. Seline scolds Damian for his teasing, but he quickly apologizes while admitting he only wanted to joke. Damian notes that Seline seemed flustered and stressed, prompting her to begin a nervous explanation. As they prepare to leave, the shopkeeper invites them back, while narrative text reflects on Damian calling the outing a date. The pair walks together down a cobblestone path as Seline inwardly questions the true nature of their relationship. The shopkeeper offers a seat as Damian asks if they are comrades regardless of gender. Damian asks if Seline is doing okay. Seline reacts to the dessert with a look of surprise.
Damian asks Seline if she remembers their history at this location.
Narrative text explains how they used to visit this spot frequently. A flashback shows a younger Damian offering his hand to comfort a crying young Seline. Damian recalls the effort required to calm her down as Seline reacts with a sudden and intense blush sounding.
Damian notes how awkward it was to borrow a handkerchief to wipe her face.
Damian observes that it has become much harder to get a seat in the popular cafe. Seline looks at Damian and wonders if he already has a date for the day. Damian admits he simply had a strong feeling he would be with Seline. Seline asks why Damian did not make formal plans to go out with her. Narrative text warns about the dangers of running out of money. Damian explains the spending habits of central nobles, while Seline reflects on academy life. Seline is taken by a sudden, startled sounding as Damian critiques her stiff demeanor.
Damian defines dating as simply enjoying good food and seeing interesting things together.
Seline realizes that she already does those things with Damian on a regular basis. Damian looks at Seline with a warm and affectionate smile. Seline looks away with a pensive and thoughtful expression.
Damian offers a gentle smile with a sudden smiling sounding.
Damian tells Seline to finish her melting parfait because he has a surprise destination in mind. Damian promises to take her somewhere he knows she will enjoy. A pair of ornate tickets is presented in a close-up. Celine's expression is taken by a sudden jaw-drop sounding as Damian suggests watching a strategy match.
Seline questions whether minors are actually permitted to watch the match.
Damian explains that it is allowed as long as a guardian is present. Damian mentions the Duchess being away as Seline listens intently. Damian notes that Seline is technically an adult now.
Narrative text confirms Seline is 18 while Damian is 21.
Damian warns that the match might be boring for those who do not enjoy the competition. Seline admits she is curious since she has never witnessed a noble house match.
Damian tells her to finish eating quickly so they can depart.
Damian reassures Seline that they have plenty of time and there is no need to rush. The pair discusses the exciting turn of events in a previous match over a tray of desserts.
Narrative text reveals that Damian has been looking at Seline the entire time.
Damian suggests that Seline could use her experience to make more friends in the House of Lords. Damian jokingly mentions that having too many friends might prevent them from spending time together.
Seline looks at Damian with an expression of quiet realization.
Narrative text considers Seline's thoughts on the value of making new friends. Damian agrees with her unspoken bots. Damian looks at Seline with a soft and sincere gaze. Damian confesses that he never grew tired of her visits and always wished she would stay longer. Damian offers a sheepish smile with a sudden, awkward sounding.
Seline wonders if she should avoid making more friends based on his comment.
Seline reacts with a sudden sweat X2 sounding as Damian discusses finding a social balance. Seline asks when Damian found the time to arrange for the restaurant rental. Damian explains that simply using his name as Duke Willow opens many doors.
Damian smiles with a sudden beam sounding as narrative text reveals he is being playful. Narrative text describes the progression of the course dinner and the beautiful window view.
Intricate details of the strawberry parfait are revealed in a final close-up.
Damian reflects on his desire to keep Seline from feeling bored during their time together. Damian asks Seline if she enjoyed their day out while she sits before a lavish dessert spread.
Seline expresses her great enjoyment and a slight sadness that their time together is ending. Seline realizes the appeal of dating and looks forward to daily outings with a loved one while Damian watches her fondly. Damian suggests one final destination for their date as they sit in the sunlit dining room. Seline is awestruck by the sight of numerous lanterns floating on the lake.
Seline asks for confirmation about the floating candles while Damian looks out over the water.
Seline questions if they are permitted to participate in the activities by the lake.
Damian reassures Seline of their permission as he approaches an attendant seated near several barrels. The pair approaches the attendant to join the festivities. The attendant asks if they are there for the special event, sparking Celine's curiosity. Narrative text recounts the ancient legend of a wizard who created the empire and proposed with starlight flowers. Damian explains the tradition of using paper boats and candles as a modern substitute for the legendary flowers. Damian requests 2 candles each for their participation. Damian thanks the attendant after receiving the decorative candles. Damian mentions he learned of the tradition from Russell, noting it is usually reserved for engaged or married couples. Seline reacts with a look of growing anxiety and uncertainty. Seline hesitates to speak, prompting Damian to ask what is on her mind. Damian gazes at Seline with a calm and patient expression. Damian questions if there is any reason he should not have brought her here. The lakefront is vibrant with couples enjoying the romantic atmosphere. Seline worries that others will misinterpret their closeness as a sign of romantic feelings. Narrative text reflects on Celine's past confusion regarding Damian's previous words. Seline desperately tries to label their bond as a comradeship rather than a romantic relationship. Narrative text notes that feelings can naturally grow from spending significant time together. Seline steals a glance at Damian as they stand by the water. Celine's hand is taken by a sudden firm hold sounding from Damian. Seline holds a beautifully crafted pink flower candle between her palms. Damian tells Seline to focus only on their date and her own enjoyment. Damian encourages Seline to place her candle on the water to avoid any future regrets. Damian confesses that this outing is also his first experience with a genuine date. Damian asks Seline to tolerate his stubbornness so he can make their first date perfect. Seline softly agrees to his request as the sun begins to set. Seline's hands release the glowing flower candle with a sudden, gentle float sounding. The basket moves with a sudden, rhythmic voom voom sounding. Damian asks Seline if she would like to try another activity while she remains by the water's edge. Narrative text observes the peaceful silence that has settled over the day. Seline looks down with a faint and serene smile. Damian looks at Seline with an expression of deep affection. Seline gazes at the shimmering water and acknowledges the immense beauty of the scene.